Chapter 542. Brat, could it be that you have martial gods? Then you don't have to hide anymore. Let them come out. Yun Song and Bing Yuan looked around vigilantly. I don't have any martial gods. Yi Hao shrugged. When the two emperors heard that there were no martial gods, they heaved a sigh of relief. But I have martial sages, Yi Hao said with a smile. Ha ha, martial sages. Bring as many as you have. Yun Song laughed arrogantly. He did not put the martial sages in his eyes at all. Bing Yuan also showed a disdainful expression because they also had many martial sages in their faction. Soldiers, attack! Yun Song and Bing Yuan shouted furiously and ordered the soldiers of the three armies. Kill! When the soldiers of the two camps heard Bing Yuan and Yun Song's words, they rushed towards Zhuge Liang and the others. Zhuge Liang and the others calmly faced the incoming soldiers without panicking. With just a wave of his hand, he was able to kill a large number of soldiers. Soldiers of Yun Song's camp, listen up. Even if I die, you must attack. Otherwise, you will be punished by military law. Those who kill these martial gods will be conferred the title of Marquis and will be greatly rewarded. At this moment, Yun Song threw caution to the wind. He only had one goal now. At worst, he would fight to the death. As a martial god, he naturally knew that martial gods were powerful, but they were not invincible. As long as there were enough people, they could exhaust them to death. Bing Yuan's camp is the same. Fight to the death. Bing Yuan and Yun Song agreed and gave the same order. Fight to the death. The soldiers of the three armies shouted and started to form a formation. They continuously rushed towards Zhuge Liang and the others. Ignorant brat, today I will show you the price of arrogance, Bing Yuan said coldly. When your men are killed, I hope you won't cry. Yun Song looked at Yi Hao mockingly. Huh? Yi Hao looked at Yun Song and Bing Yuan's proud faces and could not help but laugh loudly. Yun Song and Bing Yuan immediately looked at each other and asked, What are you laughing about? Yi Hao summoned the heavenly dragon throne and lay down on it. He closed his eyes and ignored the two emperors. We are actually being ignored. The two martial monarchs felt like their hearts had suffered a great blow. They did not expect to be ignored by Yi Hao. Brat, don't be so arrogant. Yun Song had a fiery temper. How could he accept Yi Hao's disregard? He picked up his giant blade and charged at Yi Hao. Kneel! Yi Hao suddenly widened his tiger-like eyes and directly let out an explosive shout. His eyes shot out a dignified light that could not be looked down upon as he looked towards Yun Song. Yun Song didn't know why, but when Yi Hao looked at him like this, he actually felt scared. He is merely a martial emperor. Why would I be afraid of him? After seeing Yi Hao's cultivation, Yun Song immediately threw the fear in his heart to the back of his mind. Die! Yun Song's hand no longer stopped moving, charging straight for Yi Hao's head. It looked like it was going to chop Yi Hao and the heavenly dragon throne in half. Heavenly dragon defense. Yi Hao shouted when he saw that Yun Song was still attacking. Roar! Suddenly, the ordinary-looking heavenly dragon throne suddenly shot out a rainbow-colored light, and a rainbow-colored gigantic dragon's shadow appeared out of nowhere. The rainbow-colored gigantic dragon's shadow immediately coiled in front of Yi Hao. A dragon's roar resounded through the heavens and earth. What is this? Looking at the rainbow-colored gigantic dragon's shadow in front of him, the Bing Yuan king's heart skipped a beat. But Yun Song did not care. What the hell is this? Break! Boom! The giant blade in Yun Song's hand slashed at the rainbow-colored gigantic dragon's head. The Bing Yuan king looked at Yun Song nervously. He wanted to see if Yun Song could break through the rainbow-colored gigantic dragon's defense. When the giant blade in his hand slashed at the rainbow-colored gigantic dragon's body, the scene that Yun Song imagined of the rainbow-colored gigantic dragon collapsing did not happen. Instead, a huge impact came from his arms, causing his arms to feel numb. Kneel! Yi Hao suddenly shouted, as if he had already expected this to happen. As soon as Yi Hao finished speaking, the rainbow-colored gigantic dragon opened its mouth and roared as it charged at Yun Song. Boom! The rainbow-colored dragon smashed into Yun Song's body. Yun Song's expression immediately changed, and the giant blade in his hand was sent flying. Yun Song vomited a mouthful of blood, but he quickly stabilized himself. Clenching his teeth, he unwillingly stood up. "Fuck, I don't believe it," Yun Song roared. Another weapon appeared in his hand. But this time, the rainbow-colored dragon didn't even wait for him to attack. It directly pressed down on his head. Yun Song frowned. The pressure from the rainbow-colored dragon was causing his legs to lose control. I swear I won't kneel even if I die," roared Yun Song sinisterly. At the same time, his weapon fiercely stabbed at the rainbow-colored dragon's body. Heavenly Spike Slash. Yun Song roared in anger. The martial arts power around him instantly surged. The martial arts power in his body gathered at the tip of his weapon. The Heavenly Spike Slash was a low-tier heaven-class martial skill. By relying on it, Yun Song had killed countless experts stronger than himself. But the Heavenly Spike Slash consumed a considerable amount of martial energy. With his current cultivation, he could only use it 3 times in a short period of time. Originally, he had been planning on using the Heavenly Spike Slash to deal with the Ice Origin Emperor. He hadn't expected the rainbow-colored dragon to force him to use it ahead of time. How powerful! I didn't expect him to have such a trump card. Seeing Yun Song's Heavenly Spike Slash, the Ice Origin Emperor's heart pounded. Scram! Yun Song roared once more. His weapon once more attacked the rainbow-colored dragon's body. Seeing the Heavenly Spike Slash, the rainbow-colored dragon no longer underestimated Yun Song. It also roared furiously. In the blink of an eye, martial energy exploded like a bomb. The color of the sky changed, and even the ground caved in several hundred meters. Yi Hao and the Ice Origin Emperor immediately looked at the rainbow-colored dragon and Yun Song. They saw that the rainbow-colored dragon's image had become much more transparent. It was clear that the rainbow-colored dragon's strength had dropped by more than a level. As for Yun Song, he wasn't much better off. His armor had shattered, and even the weapon in his hand was gone. Yun Song's hair was disheveled, and there was a trace of blood at the corner of his mouth. Ice Origin, why aren't you doing anything? Are you waiting to reap the benefits? Yun Song looked angrily at the Ice Origin Emperor. Hearing Yun Song's words, the Ice Origin Emperor immediately felt embarrassed. After all, Yi Hao was their common enemy. He couldn't let Yun Song deal with him alone. Furthermore, Yun Song's injuries weren't light. It was time for him to make a move. Yun Song, what are you saying? Rest for a while. Watch me. After saying that, the Ice Origin Emperor raised his 3-pointed, double-edged spear and charged at the rainbow-colored dragon. Ice Origin Snow Seal. The Ice Origin Emperor didn't dare to hold back. He immediately used his trump card. He knew that if he didn't use his trump card, he would be looking for trouble. Chapter 543. The Ice Field Emperor's Ice Field Seal was also a heaven-class low-tier martial technique. This martial technique was so powerful that if a person's level was much lower than the Ice Field Emperor's, their blood would instantly freeze within the range of the Ice Field Seal. In serious cases, their soul would be frozen. If a martial artist's blood was frozen, they would lose their ability to move. If their soul was frozen, they could only face death. From this, one could see how powerful the Ice Field Seal was. Seeing the Ice Field Emperor's Ice Field Seal, Yi Hao couldn't help but feel that the surrounding air was gradually becoming colder. It's actually snowing. Yi Hao looked at the sky in disbelief. There were actually snowflakes floating in the air. This martial technique is not bad. Yi Hao is also very envious of the Ice Field Emperor's martial technique. If it can be dropped later, that would be even better. Little 7, can you still hold on? If you can't, then retreat. Yi Hao couldn't help but look at the rainbow dragon worriedly. Roar. The rainbow dragon roared in defiance, indicating that it could do it. Roar. The rainbow dragon roared again. Suddenly, changes occurred in front of the rainbow dragon. That is, rainbow dragon aura? Yi Hao guessed when he saw the aura of metal, wood, water, fire, earth, wind, and lightning appear in front of the rainbow dragon. Yi Hao knew that the rainbow dragon had its own martial technique, But he didn't expect that the rainbow dragon's aura would correspond to metal, wood, water, fire, earth, wind, and lightning. 7 different types of attacks. This is going to be interesting. Seeing this scene, Yihao laughed in his heart. The power of snow versus the power of metal, wood, water, fire, earth, wind, and lightning. It was hard to tell which was stronger. If you're still too weak. The Ice Field Emperor was a little surprised when he felt the power of metal, wood, water, fire, earth, wind, and lightning. After all, there were 7 different types of power. It was a little too messy. Only fire could restrain his ice field seal. But what was this little bit of fire? It wasn't enough for him to extinguish it. Seal. The Ice Field Emperor pointed his spear, and the surrounding temperature dropped rapidly. Even the scattered snow turned into goose feathers. And if you think that this is just ordinary snow, then you are gravely mistaken. Snow fell on the soldiers below, instantly turning them into ice sculptures. Their auras disappeared, and they did not even have the chance to dodge. Most of the snowflakes fell to the ground, and the ground was instantly frozen. It could be seen that the temperature of the snow was terrifying. 1. 2 types. 3. The 7 nature powers of the rainbow dragon were instantly frozen by the snowflakes. The first to freeze was the water, followed by the wind, which was directly converted into the Ice Origin Emperor's own power. Ice and snow combined with cold wind. Was there even need to think about that kind of feeling? Then the metal, wood, earth, and thunder were all frozen in the air by the snowflakes. Only a huge fireball was left, and it began to tremble in the air, looking like it would be extinguished at any moment. Let's see how long you can last. I'll definitely turn you into an ice sculpture. The Ice Origin King thought gleefully as he saw that victory was in sight. Huh! As he shouted, more power surged out of his body, turning into palm-sized snowflakes that fell on the fireball. Every time a snowflake fell, the fireball would decrease by a little. Little 7, can you do it? Seeing Little 7 at a disadvantage, Yihao anxiously asked. If Little 7 was really turned into an ice sculpture, it would not be fun. Roar! The rainbow dragon did not panic. It roared at Yihao, giving Yihao a look that said, let's see how it performs. Does Little 7 have other ultimate moves? Seeing that 6 of the 7 nature powers of the rainbow dragon had been frozen, the remaining fireball was in imminent danger. Yihao curiously guessed. Die for me, foolish dragon, the Ice Origin King said disdainfully. At the same time, he flicked his spear, and more snowflakes fell on the fireball. Roar! Suddenly, just as the fireball was about to be extinguished, the rainbow dragon swung its tail, instantly destroying the snowflakes that had sealed 6 of its powers. As the rainbow-colored dragon swung its tail, the frost instantly dissipated, and the 6 sealed powers regained their freedom. Seeing this scene, the Ice Origin King did not panic, because even if these powers were unsealed, they would not be able to cause any harm to him. More importantly, he could seal these powers at any time. As long as he sealed all the powers, he could easily seal the rainbow dragon and attack Yihao. Seal them again. Roar! Seeing all the snowflakes falling on his 7 powers, the rainbow dragon roared proudly. He was about to use his ultimate move. The aura of the 7 powers that were gradually being sealed suddenly changed. Seeing the 7 powers changing, the aura of the rainbow dragon kept changing. Boom! 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 Suddenly, the 6 powers that were about to be sealed exploded continuously. As for those 6 powers, they actually all turned into fireballs, emitting a violent heat. The snowflakes turned into water and evaporated, disappearing into the air. Upon seeing the sight before him, the Glacier Plain God Emperor felt as if a tsunami had struck his heart, as if he had suffered a huge blow. How is this possible? The Ice Origin King still could not believe what he was seeing. He had already used his martial technique. How could it change? There were clearly 7 powers. How could they all turn into one? And the 7 fireballs in front of him could not be faked. Even if it was unbelievable, it had happened. The Ice Origin King could feel the cold air around him gradually warming up. Waves of heat blew past his face. Oomph. So what if it's a fireball? I could still freeze it. The Ice Origin Monarch roared as he recovered from his shock. Similarly, he was also unconvinced. After all, as an emperor, he naturally had his pride. Following the Ice Origin King's roar, the power of the martial path in his body rumbled and surged out, turning into snowflakes. And the surrounding heat finally stabilized, no longer rising. At this moment, the Ice Origin King had already used all his power. The veins on his head were bulging, and beads of sweat were dripping down his forehead. This was the sweat of exhaustion, not caused by the heat. The Ice Origin King used all his power, and the cold air once again took over. Controlling the snowflakes, the Ice Origin King pressed down on the 7 fireballs. And under the Ice Origin King's attack, the 7 fireballs began to tremble weakly. Ice Origin King, hold on a little longer. Just one more step. Seeing that the Ice Origin King had already gained the upper hand, Yun Song clutched his chest and shouted excitedly. Chapter 544. Yi Hao looked at the rainbow dragon anxiously. He was already prepared to retrieve the rainbow dragon. The rainbow dragon was the spirit of the Sky Dragon throne. If the rainbow dragon was destroyed, the Sky Dragon throne would be useless. Bing Yuan, kill it. Kill this beast. Seeing the rainbow dragon at a disadvantage, Yun Song shouted anxiously. After all, the rainbow dragon had caused him a lot of damage. He wanted to pull out the rainbow dragon's tendons. Most importantly, he would be able to deal with Yi Hao after killing the 7-color dragon. Looking at Yi Hao, who was sitting on the Sky Dragon throne, Yun Song's eyes were filled with killing intent. He gritted his teeth in hatred. Seal! Bing Yuan shouted. Instantly, all the energy in Bing Yuan's snow seal pressed down on the 7 fireballs. The flames on the 7 fireballs were constantly changing. Roar! The rainbow dragon suddenly opened its mouth wide and sucked hard. It actually wanted to suck the 7 fireballs into its mouth. Bing Yuan was also stunned by the rainbow dragon's actions. The rainbow dragon was relying on the 7 fireballs to hold on and fight against him. At this critical moment, the rainbow dragon had actually retrieved the fireballs. Wasn't that courting death? Oomph, since you're in a hurry to die, I'll fulfill your wish. Bing Yuan sneered. At the same time, he attacked the rainbow dragon. Under Bing Yuan's control, all the snow and ice in the area attacked the rainbow dragon. In the blink of an eye, all the snow and ice covered the rainbow dragon. Ha ha ha, stupid thing. Bing Yuan laughed proudly when he saw the rainbow dragon covered in snow and ice. He couldn't see the rainbow dragon's appearance. He didn't expect the rainbow dragon to give up at this critical moment. Otherwise, he wouldn't have one so easily. Bing Yuan, you did well. Yun Song praised with a smile. Kid, if you kneel and beg for mercy now, you might suffer less. Bing Yuan smiled at Yun Song. Then, he looked at Yi Hao proudly. Now that the rainbow dragon was gone, Zhuge Liang and the others couldn't spare any time to help. Therefore, in their eyes, Yi Hao had already become someone they could slaughter at will. Brat, didn't you tell me to kneel down? Aren't I standing still? Why don't you kneel down before me? Yin Song was also looking at Yi Hao with a cold smile on his face. Just as he finished speaking, he was about to attack Yi Hao. Bang! Roar! Just as Yin Song was about to attack, a loud noise came from the 7-color dragon. A huge fireball appeared where the 7-color dragon was. All of the ice and snow melted in the blink of an eye. A dragon roar could be heard. Pooh! Beside the rainbow dragon, the Ice Origin King spat out a mouthful of blood and was sent flying like a broken kite. As for Yin Song, who was about to make a move on Yi Hao, his eyes suddenly narrowed, and he quickly reacted in his heart. Not good. Run. Yin Song glanced at the giant 7-color dragon. Without hesitation, he immediately fled. Rumble. Suddenly, the huge fireball beside the rainbow dragon smashed towards Yin Song. This fireball seemed to be the amalgamation of all the previous fireballs. It was so huge that it seemed like the entire world was in a furnace. In the blink of an eye, the ground started to crack. Even though Yi Hao was a 7th-order martial emperor, he could feel the heat in the air. Ha! Fight! Looking at the fireball coming towards him, Yun Song made up his mind. Since he couldn't escape, he might as well give it a try. Sky Spike Slash! Yun Song shouted. He placed his weapon in front of him and charged towards the fireball. He didn't believe that the 7-color dragon could defy the heavens. Boom! In the blink of an eye, Yun Song and the huge fireball collided. Instantly, sparks flew in all directions. The huge fireball burst into countless smaller fireballs that flew in all directions. Ha! Yun Song shouted again. He held his weapon and blocked the huge fireball. The two of them were in a deadlock. The weapon in Yun Song's hand was burned red by the scorching flames. This was an Emperor-grade weapon. If it was a weapon below the Emperor grade, it would have been melted into molten iron and turned into nothingness. Yun Song wasn't any better. He didn't know if it was because of the heat or because of the flames, but his entire body had turned red. Beads of sweat continuously appeared on his body. At the same time, he was being dried up. Kacha! Suddenly, the weapon in Yun Song's hand made a cracking sound. This meant that the weapon in Yun Song's hand was on the verge of destruction. Not good. Yun Song's heart tightened. Looking at the weapon that was about to be destroyed, he was in a dilemma. Quickly, save his majesty. Seeing that Yun Song was in trouble, the soldiers in Yun Song's camp immediately shouted. Instantly, countless people flew towards the fireball. PFFF. Bang! As a result, many soldiers were seriously injured by the fireball before they could even get close. Some were even burned to ashes. However, they could see that the fireball had weakened a lot. Seeing that the fireball had weakened, Yun Song was relieved. He immediately shouted to the soldiers, "All of you, continue to attack." With Yun Song's order, even more soldiers rushed towards the fireball. Roar! Looking at the soldiers rushing towards it, the rainbow-colored dragon let out a disdainful roar. Boom! Suddenly, the huge fireball exploded and turned into countless smaller fireballs, shooting in all directions. PFFF! 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 The fireballs accurately shot into the bodies of all the soldiers. The weaker soldiers immediately started to catch fire from within their bodies. They were burned to ashes. Retreat! Yun Song didn't expect that the fireball would suddenly explode. The moment the fireball exploded, he immediately shouted. Hiss! Yun Song frantically retreated. However, his back was still hit by the fireball. Even his armor was melted by the fireball. His back was a mess of flesh and blood. It was pitch black. If one were to smell it carefully, they would definitely be able to smell the smell of burnt flesh. It hurts. Feeling the intense pain on his back, Yun Song grimaced in pain. He immediately took out a recovery pill and swallowed it. When he turned around, he saw that his back had turned into a sea of fire. As for those soldiers that rushed towards him, other than himself, they were all burned to nothingness. Little bastard, I'm not done with you. Yun Song looked at Yi Hao with resentment and roared furiously, because his current sorry state was all caused by Yi Hao. After the rainbow-colored dragon used the rainbow-colored dragon might, it became even weaker. It let out a low roar at Yi Hao and shot into the heavenly dragon throne. Little Seven's performance was not bad. Yi Hao praised as he looked at the sea of fire on the ground. He didn't expect that the rainbow-colored dragon phantom was actually so powerful. It was actually able to defeat Yun Song and Bing Yuan. Furthermore, the two of them were injured to different degrees. This had already exceeded his expectations. Furthermore, the explosion of the huge fireball had actually increased his dragon power by nearly 1 million. In other words, the might of the fireball had actually killed more than 1 million soldiers. Chapter 545. Ahem, Yun Song, what happened? Bing Yuan had just woken up from his coma. He looked at the sea of fire below him and asked in shock. Bing Yuan looked at Yun Song and realized that Yun Song's body was covered in burn marks. Even the domineering armor on his body had lost its former elegance and was now beautiful. Looking at Yun Song now, he no longer looked like an emperor who had conquered the battlefield. He looked no different from a beggar. Fortunately, the rainbow dragon had disappeared. This allowed him to heave a sigh of relief. Just now, the rainbow dragon spat out a huge fireball and severely injured you. Yin Song immediately told Bing Yuan what had happened. Since the rainbow dragon has disappeared, what are we waiting for? Let's join forces and kill this little bastard. Bing Yuan looked at Yi Hao with murderous eyes. The two of you, the feeling of being burned must be terrible. Yi Hao ignored the murderous looks in their eyes and asked with a smile, "Little bastard, I'll kill you." Feeling the burning pain all over his body, Yin Song was furious. Furthermore, Yi Hao had dared to provoke him. Did he really think that he was someone to be trifled with? Don't be in such a hurry. You haven't seen a good show yet. Yi Hao waved his hand. A good show? Bing Yuan frowned and looked at Yi Hao in confusion. Little bastard, what other tricks are you trying to play? Yin Song stared at Yi Hao and roared without holding back. Look at your dragon power. Yi Hao said with a smile. What's wrong with our dragon power? The two emperors looked at their dragon power suspiciously after hearing Yi Hao's words. How is this possible? Where did my dragon power go? Little bastard, what did you do? The two emperors suddenly shouted in agitation. The reason for that was because they discovered that their dragon power had decreased substantially. Yin Song's dragon power had decreased by 1 billion. That was 1 billion. Even a top empire only had that much dragon power. Yin Song's empire only had 40 dragon power in total. In the blink of an eye, it had decreased by a quarter. How could he accept this? As for the Icefield faction, it was even more terrifying. Their dragon power dropped by 2 billion, which was half of their total. Bing Yuan and Yin Song felt like they were going crazy as they stared at Yi Hao crazily. Have you ever experienced despair? Yi Hao suddenly asked. Bing Yuan and Yin Song were stunned. They didn't know what Yi Hao meant. The two of them stared at Yi Hao. Squeak, squeak, squeak. Suddenly, the cry of the heaven-devouring rat could be heard. What was that sound? Hearing heaven-swallowing rat's voice, Bing Yuan and Yin Song vigilantly picked up their weapons and looked around. However, with just a glance, his expression changed drastically. At some point, countless rats had appeared around them, drooling as they stared at them. Just a bunch of damn rats. What's there to be afraid of? Yin Song coldly snorted. Ice Principle swallowed his saliva and reminded, Look at their cultivation. What's wrong with their cultivation? Earlier, Yin Song didn't check the heaven-swallowing rat's cultivation. He listened to Bing Yuan and directly shouted, Peak martial saint. As martial gods, they shouldn't be so agitated when they saw martial saints. But now, it was hard for them to remain calm. There were several thousand heaven-swallowing rats. I don't believe it. Yin Song still couldn't believe that Yi Hao had so many peak martial saint-level rats. He immediately looked at the other rats. The more he looked, the more frightened and powerless he became. Because, without exception, all 4,000 heaven-swallowing rats were peak martial saint level. 2 second-order martial gods who were seriously injured were fighting against 4,000 peak martial saint-level heaven-swallowing rats. Who was stronger and who was weaker could be seen at a glance. Little ones, play with them. Looking at Bing Yuan and Yin Song's panicked expressions, Yi Hao said to the heaven-swallowing rats, Squeak, squeak. The heaven-swallowing rats immediately responded to Yi Hao and surrounded Bing Yuan and Yin Song from all directions. Yin Song, no need to panic. The heaven-swallowing rats also have weak spots. Their defense is trash. As long as we cooperate well, it's not impossible to kill this group of disgusting beasts. Bing Yuan cautiously looked at the rats around them and said in a low voice, I should be able to use Icy Snow Seal again. In a while, you use Sky Thorn Slash. You must seize the opportunity. And Bing Yuan and Yin Song didn't dare to be careless, cautiously looking at the heaven-swallowing rats. Icy Snow Seal. Suddenly, Bing Yuan shouted loudly and used a martial skill, Bing Yuan Shui Seal. In an instant, the surrounding air suddenly dropped. Roar! Suddenly, a dragon's roar sounded. Bing Yuan's heart suddenly panicked, and he looked back in fear. It would have been better if he didn't look. Once he looked, his martial skill was actually interrupted. How could the heaven-swallowing rats let go of this opportunity? They instantly opened their mouths, revealing sharp teeth and biting. You want to fight with me? You're still too inexperienced, Yi Hao said with a proud smile. At the same time, he looked at the giant dragon beside him. Master, that group of rats are all peak martial saints. Can you give me a pill as well? Looking at the heaven-swallowing rat's cultivation, the giant dragon said covetously. His cultivation had already recovered to martial emperor level. However, if he wanted to recover to peak martial saint level, he would still need some time. Yi Hao glanced at the giant dragon. In his heart, he wasn't too willing to give the giant dragon the peak martial saint pill. This was because there was only one disadvantage to peak martial saints. That was, after eating the peak martial saint pill, they wouldn't be able to continue cultivating in the future. In Yi Hao's opinion, the giant dragon's potential was far beyond peak martial saint level. You can give it to him. The dragon race has a special physique and has a strong immunity. Peak martial saint pill doesn't have any restrictions for him. Just as Yi Hao was hesitating, the system in his mind suddenly said, "Why didn't you say so earlier?" When he heard the system's words, Yi Hao was overjoyed. However, he still complained. However, the system seemed to have automatically omitted this complaint. Once again, it fell into silence and ignored Yi Hao. Here, since there were no restrictions, Yi Hao immediately took out a peak martial saint pill and gave it to the giant dragon. "Thank you, master." The giant dragon sniffed the peak martial saint pill and was overjoyed. Then he swallowed it. Roar! The giant dragon suddenly roared into the sky. His roar was filled with joy. "Master, my cultivation has finally recovered." The giant dragon cried out excitedly. "I'll let you have a taste of my power," the giant dragon said excitedly as he looked at Bing Yuan and Yun Song, who were fighting with the heaven-swallowing rats. Then, like a missile, the giant dragon extended his sharp claws and charged toward the two. Bang! The two were already having a hard time dealing with the attack were instantly sent flying. The two spat out a mouthful of blood. Chapter 546. No wonder it's one of the top demonic beasts in the 10,000 countries continent. Its fighting strength is indeed powerful. Yi Hao looked at the strength that the dragon had unleashed. It was definitely comparable to any beginner-level martial god. Not to mention Bing Yuan and Yun Song. They were already seriously injured. Even if they weren't seriously injured, they probably wouldn't be a match for the dragon. Squeak, squeak. Seeing that Yun Song and Bing Yuan were seriously injured and unable to get up, the heaven-devouring rats immediately pounced on them. "No, no, get lost. You bunch of dirty rats, don't bite me. I'll kill you bunch of damn rats. Ignorant kid, I, Yun Song, will not live under the same sky as you." Yun Song and Bing Yuan were constantly being bitten by the rats. The pain on their bodies caused them to constantly curse. At this moment, the most ruthless person in their hearts was Yi Hao. Because all of this was caused by Yi Hao. Gradually, Bing Yuan and Yun Song's body were completely divided up by the heaven-devouring rats. "Kill!" Yi Hao immediately ordered the heaven-devouring rats. The heaven-devouring rats immediately shot towards the army below. "Not good, His Majesty is dead. Not good, Alliance leader is dead." Many soldiers saw Bing Yuan and Yun Song being killed with their own eyes and shouted in panic. "What, His Majesty is dead? Then what should we do? Might as well commit suicide." At this moment, the atmosphere of Yun Song and Bing Yuan being killed gradually spread throughout the army. Everyone's mood was terrifyingly gloomy. It's already 450,000. Yi Hao looked at his dragon power and saw that it was still rising rapidly. One must know that this 450,000 dragon power could be considered a mid-tier sacred rank force in the 10,000 countries continent. There were only a few mid-tier sacred rank forces in the 10,000 countries continent, and there were less than 20 of them. And Yi Hao had squeezed into a mid-tier sacred rank force through the 10,000 countries ceremony. At this moment, outside the secret realm, what is the origin of this fire dragon empire? Is it trying to change the structure of the 10,000 countries continent? It's already 450,000 dragon power. I remember that it was only 14 dragon power at the beginning. and there are only 3 people left on the Empire ranking list. He actually took down 6 of them in a row. At this moment, everyone was looking at the incomparably dazzling, chaotic entry list in the air. Each and every one of them felt their hearts palpitating. This was a fear of the unknown. They didn't know what the Fire Dragon Empire was, and they didn't know what would happen if the Empire rankings disappeared. At this moment, they could only observe the movements of the Fire Dragon Empire through the dragon energy on the Chaos leaderboard. Look, the Nation of Gods list is gone. Just when everyone was worried about the future, the Nation of Gods leaderboard suddenly disappeared. Did the Fire Dragon Empire enter the Holy Kingdom? Everyone was guessing. Impossible. The Fire Dragon Empire is still in the Imperial Kingdom's secret realm. Someone immediately retorted. Everyone looked at Yun Song and Bing Yuan's rankings. Sure enough, the battle had not ended yet. Then why did the Nation of Gods list disappear? Everyone was confused. So it's this tiring to slaughter. Yi Hao sat on the heavenly dragon throne and yawned. It had been almost 10 days, and the soldiers of Yun Song and Bing Yuan's camp were still not finished. After all, there were 5 billion soldiers. Even if the ancient mutated beasts and sky-devouring rats were fighting day and night, there were still 2 billion soldiers left. But this was all dragon energy. Even if there were another 10 billion, he would still accept it. And now, his dragon energy had broken through to 700,000. Not to mention others. Even he himself was deeply surprised. Looks like it'll take a few more days. Yi Hao heard the beast roars coming from all around. At this moment, Yin Song and Bing Yuan's people were no longer charging blindly. Most of them had already started a run. Otherwise, it wouldn't be so tiring. It's finally over. After another 7 or 8 days, all the soldiers were finally slaughtered. Yi Hao finally let out a breath of relief. Ding dong, ancient mutated beast dead. Ding dong, ancient mutated beast dead. Ding dong, sky-devouring rat dead. Ding dong, sky-devouring rat dead. Ding dong, ancient mutated beast dead. Just as Yi Hao was about to call back all the ancient mutated beasts and sky-devouring rats, the system's notifications suddenly rang out continuously. What? Hearing this notification, Yi Hao was shocked. At the same time, he was puzzled. One had to know that the ancient mutated beasts and sky-devouring rats had also been killed when they were slaughtering Yun Song and Bing Yuan soldiers. But those were only a few, and only one would die every few days. Now, it had rung more than 10 times. Most importantly, the Yun Song and Bing Yuan soldiers of this world had all been killed. How could the ancient mutated beasts and sky-devouring rats have died for no reason? There are strong people approaching. The host is advised to leave quickly. There are dangers approaching. The host is advised to leave quickly. At this moment, the system's notifications suddenly rang out urgently. Yi Hao ignored the system. Instead, he narrowed his eyes and looked at the people in the distance. You must be the master of that group of ancient mutated beasts. Soon, a group of people landed in front of Yi Hao. The leader was actually a very young man. Jinwei looked at Yi Hao arrogantly. Boy, what a big pill. Why don't you kneel down when you see God Jinwei? A guard behind Jinwei also didn't put Yi Hao in his eyes, because they were from the Jintian Divine Kingdom, one of the 4 divine kingdoms in the Myriad Kingdom continent. Moreover, Jinwei was the crown prince of the Jintian Divine Kingdom. In the Myriad Kingdom continent, he was definitely a supreme existence. This chair is not bad. I want it. You can scram now. Jinwei didn't even look at Yi Hao, as if Yi Hao couldn't enter his eyes at all. He directly said in a commanding tone. It was as if it was an honor for Yi Hao to give him the heavenly dragon throne. Yi Hao. Hearing Jinwei's tone, Yi Hao frowned. He didn't expect Jinwei to be so insolent. He hadn't even settled the score of killing his ancient mutated beasts for no reason. He even dared to speak to him in a commanding tone. Now, he even wanted to snatch his heavenly dragon throne. If this matter happened to a normal person, they would be angry, let alone Yi Hao. Boy, did you hear that? Hurry up and thank God Jinwei. The guard beside Jinwei didn't wait for Yi Hao to speak, and said the same thing. Who do you think you are? Yi Hao looked at the guard contemptuously. You're just a dog. You barked before your master did. You have no eyesight. What did you say? The guard seemed to have heard wrongly and couldn't help but shout in exasperation. If you have the ability, say it again. Although he was a guard, he was a member of the Jintian Divine Kingdom and a favorite of God Jinwei. Not to mention others, even the leader of the Holy Dynasty would have to give him some face when they saw him. Chapter 547. Jinwei's face also became ugly. As the saying goes, you have to look at the owner before you hit the dog. Yi Hao ignored the guards like this, which was also ignoring himself. Jinwei's face became gloomy, and he said in a deep voice, "Teach him a lesson for me." Behind Jinwei, a group of mid-level martial god guards immediately rolled up their sleeves and walked towards Yi Hao with a sneer. They didn't even take out their weapons because, in their eyes, Yi Hao was not worth their weapons at all. Jinwei stood proudly on the side. In their opinion, in this world, there was no one they couldn't afford to offend, and no one dared to offend them. And Yi Hao dared to not give them face, so he must pay a painful price. Courting death. Jinwei was arrogant, but Yi Hao was also not to be trifled with. These people around Jinwei were all around the 5th or 6th order martial god. The magical beasts were too scattered, and it was too late to call them back. After so many days of fighting, each of them was weak. Even if they came back, they were not the opponents of these guards. Needless to say, Zhuge Liang did not have the advantage in numbers at all. It was the same in terms of cultivation realm. But Yi Hao still did not panic because he had the peak martial god composite potion. This was the system's reward for fusing the origin fragments. He did not expect to use it so soon. Give it to Zhuge Liang. Yi Hao thought for a moment and decided to give the potion to Zhuge Liang. Thinking of this, Yi Hao immediately summoned Zhuge Liang. "Ha! Idiot, a third-order martial god trash wants to deal with my mid-level martial god subordinates." Seeing Yi Hao summon Zhuge Liang, Jinwei laughed loudly. Jinwei mocked Yi Hao loudly. At this moment, in his eyes, Yi Hao was like an idiot. Kill this trash first, then deal with that kid. Where did so many powerhouses come from? Zhuge Liang was summoned, and the usual calmness on his face disappeared. Zhuge Liang looked nervously at Yi Hao, looking for help, because he knew that these people did not come with good intentions, and he was not their opponent. After all, he was only a low-level martial god, and the other party was a group of mid-level martial god. "Master, I'll hold them back. You run." Zhuge Liang could not think of a countermeasure and could only transmit his voice to Yi Hao. "Why are you running?" "Drink this," Yi Hao said angrily. He had not expected that even his own subordinates would look down on him so much. This was not Zhuge Liang's fault. After all, the disparity in power was obvious. Although Zhuge Liang did not know what the peak Einerjar compound was, he had some guesses in his heart. All Zhuge Liang immediately took the medicine and drank it. No reaction? Zhuge Liang looked at Yi Hao anxiously. When Yi Hao saw this, he felt a little guilty. Could it be that he had been tricked by the system because the peak martial god composite medicine was not effective? Kill! Suddenly, a person shouted and a circle of sharp weapons smashed towards Zhuge Liang. Seeing the incoming fist, Zhuge Liang could only vaguely see the shadow of the fist. His mind was quickly making plans and dodging routes. However, his speed could not keep up with his thoughts at all. Just as he was about to dodge, the fist had already landed on his body. Boom! With a muffled sound, Zhuge Liang was directly sent flying. "Ha! Trash! What a trash! You can't even withstand a single blow." The person who punched could not help but laugh proudly. At the same time, he looked at Jinwei respectfully, hoping that Jinwei would reward him. Jinwei was in a good mood. When he saw Zhuge Liang being sent flying, he felt that he had instantly gained face. "You did well. When we go back, I will reward you greatly," Jinwei said with a smile. At the same time, Jinwei looked at Yi Hao contemptuously. "Kid, you want to fight with me? Who do you think you are?" Yi Hao's face was gloomy at this moment. At the same time, he contacted the system angrily. "System, I need an explanation." The system was silent for a moment. "This is the system's fault. It forgot to tell you the flaw of the peak martial god composite medicine. It needs a buffer time of 300 seconds. Yi Hao was even more furious. He was angry that the system did not remind him earlier. One had to know that 300 seconds was 5 minutes. These 5 minutes could kill someone. The system was silent for a moment again before it said, "In order to make up for the system's mistake, the host will be rewarded with a peak martial god pill. I almost died, and you only compensated me with 1 pill." Yi Hao laughed in his heart, but he still pretended to be unhappy and asked. After all, he was just angry at the beginning. The system did not tell him in advance. He did not expect the system to compensate him, but he did not expect the stingy system to really compensate him. Moreover, it was a peak martial god pill. It could be said that the system was giving him a peak martial god expert. The system will help Zhuge Liang. This is the system's greatest right. After all, this world has its own rules. There are too many restrictions on the system. If he did not obtain so much dragon power, the system would not be able to do it. Hearing the system's words, Yi Hao was already very satisfied. He was now looking forward to the system making more mistakes in the future. That way, he would be able to get some additional rewards. Cough, cough. At this moment, Zhuge Liang finally got up from the ground. He looked at Yi Hao with some resentment in his eyes. He wondered if he had tricked him and deliberately made him drink plain water so that he could get beaten up. "Oh my, you can still stand up." Zhen Wei's subordinate saw Zhuge Liang stand up and walk towards him provocatively. "Continue lying down for me." Zhen Wei's subordinate punched Zhuge Liang once again. And, just as Zhuge Liang was about to dodge, he suddenly felt a powerful force in his body. "Little Exan, don't waste time. Kill him directly." Zhen Wei ordered his subordinate. "Yes." Little Exan answered respectfully. He looked at Zhuge Liang with a cruel smile on his face. Bang! Just as Little Exan's fist was about to hit Zhuge Liang suddenly moved. Little Exan felt his fist become light and mist. Little Exan looked for Zhuge Liang, but he discovered that the Zhuge Liang in front of him had disappeared. Where is he? Little Exan could not believe that Zhuge Liang had disappeared. He did not believe that he could not hit Zhuge Liang. Zhuge Liang was clearly a third-order martial god trash. How could he dodge his attack? This was simply inconceivable. Even Zhen Wei was taken aback. Suddenly, he felt a gust of wind blowing behind him. Zhen Wei was startled and wanted to run away. "I advise you not to move." Zhuge Liang's voice suddenly sounded in Zhen Wei's ears. Zhen Wei's face turned ugly. "Hurry up and activate my god's son Zhen Wei." "Arrogant brat, do you know who you're holding in your hands?" "Brat, I advise you to kneel down and admit your mistake. It's not too late now." Chapter 548. "Kid, I advise you to get your dog to let go of me." Zhen Wei didn't panic. He knew that it was useless to talk to Zhuge Liang, so he ordered Yi Hao directly. "Why should I?" Yi Hao asked with a smile. "Because of my status." Zhen Wei said haughtily. In his opinion, his status was a golden ticket to avoid death. After all, he was the crown prince of the Jintian divine nation, one of the 4 divine nations. Who would dare to provoke him? "Is that so?" Yi Hao got up and walked to Zhen Wei's side. Zhen Wei was still smiling. He believed that Yi Hao would let him go respectfully. However, he wouldn't let Yi Hao go. No one had ever made him so unhappy and dare to capture him. This was not giving him any face. If he didn't give him any face, he wouldn't give the Jintian divine nation any face. The consequences would be severe. Get your dog to chop off his own hands and offer up your chair with both hands. If you say no, I'm in a good mood and might even spare your life. Zhen Wei ordered Yi Hao. "Spare your ancestors? How dare you act tough in front of me?" Yi Hao's smile faded when he heard Zhen Wei's words. He raised his fist and swung it at Zhen Wei's head. "Do you really think this is your home? You don't care about the occasion when you act tough. Why don't you take a look at whose hands you are? God's son? I think you're more like a lunatic." Yi Hao's fist was aimed at Zhen Wei's head without any aim. Recalling Zhen Wei's arrogant and insolent appearance, Yi Hao still felt unsatisfied. He directly used his leg to kick Zhen Wei. Zhen Wei was completely stunned. His subordinates were also stunned. Even Zhuge Liang was stunned. Zheng Wei hadn't expected that Yi Hao would actually dare to hit him. Moreover, it was a violent beating and a punch to his face. Before this, he had never been hit by anyone. Not even a single hair on his body had been hurt. He had been born with a silver spoon in his mouth for so long. Everyone who saw him treated him well. But today he was actually beaten up, and by a little brat at that. Therefore, at this moment, Zheng Wei fell into a state of confusion. He didn't even resist, and just stared blankly at Yi Hao. As for Zheng Wei's subordinates, their jaws dropped in shock. The divine son has been beaten. We're finished. We're dead for sure this time. Who is this brat? How dare he hit our divine son? Doesn't he know how terrifying the Zheng Wei divine nation is? Even the holy dynasty is an existence that can be easily overturned. Everyone watched this scene quietly. It was not that they did not want to rescue Zheng Wei, but they were afraid that if they provoked Yi Hao, he would kill Zheng Wei. Zhuge Liang did not expect his lord to have such a violent side. Aren't you, Zheng Wei, arrogant and conceited? I specialize in beating up people like you who act pretentious and conceited. The more Yi Hao beat him, the more he vented his anger. When he saw that Zheng Wei didn't know how to resist, and Yi Hao stopped, he wondered if Zheng Wei had been beaten silly. Hey, stop acting pretentious. Yi Hao slapped Zheng Wei again to wake him up. You actually dare to hit me? At this moment, Zheng Wei revealed an expression of disbelief. Zheng Wei's subordinates blushed with shame. Yi Hao didn't dare to hit him. He directly beat him up. Brat, let's talk nicely. Let go of our divine son. Zheng Wei's subordinates swallowed their saliva and said in a low voice. Yi Hao glanced at Zheng Wei's subordinates. Seeing Yi Hao's sharp eyes, everyone panicked, because this kind of gaze was much more intimidating than Zheng Wei's usual gaze. None of them dared to look at Yi Hao and quickly lowered their heads. All of you kneel down, Yi Hao directly said to everyone in a commanding tone. What? Are you crazy? Everyone looked at Yi Hao in shock. What a joke. He actually asked them to kneel down. Who were they? They were from the Zhentian divine nation. Other than the Zhentian divine emperor and Zheng Wei, only others would kneel to them. Who else would they kneel to? But Yi Hao, this arrogant and reckless brat, actually asked them to kneel down. Kill him for me. At this moment, Zheng Wei had finally recovered from the shock of being beaten up. Then, he felt a burning pain on his cheeks. His heart was burning with anger. He roared furiously, and his eyes were filled with killing intent. I advise you to be obedient. Be careful that I don't cut off your flesh and feed it to the rats. Yi Hao took out a dagger and slapped Zheng Wei's face. Hearing Yi Hao's words, Zheng Wei looked at the sky-devouring rat and couldn't help but snort coldly. The words that were in his throat were forcefully swallowed back down. Even if this was a secret realm, it was still a nightmarish experience. He didn't want to experience it. Why aren't you kneeling down? Do you want to see your divine son being eaten by rats? Seeing the hesitation on everyone's face and the anger in many of their eyes, Yi Hao continued to threaten. Everyone was unwilling to kneel down to Yi Hao because it would damage the reputation of Zhentian Kingdom. Brat, think carefully. If you want us to kneel down, the consequences are not something you can bear. One of them gritted his teeth and threatened. If Zheng Wei wasn't in Yi Hao's hands, he would have torn Yi Hao into pieces. It seems like you have a lot of nonsense. Then don't blame me for being impolite. After saying that, Yi Hao took out his dagger and slashed at Zheng Wei. No! Seeing Yi Hao's action, many people shouted in unison. Hiss! Ah! Zheng Wei let out a scream. Blood immediately gushed out from Zheng Wei's side. I'm going to kill you. I'm going to kill you. I'm going to kill everyone in your kingdom. The pain almost made Zheng Wei lose his mind, and he kept shouting. Are you going to kneel or not? Yi Hao pressed the dagger against Zheng Wei's body and continued to ask. Don't hurt the divine son. We'll kneel. Everyone had ugly looks on their faces. They didn't dare guarantee that Yi Hao would say anything else. They had originally thought that Yi Hao was just threatening them. However, they hadn't expected that Yi Hao would really dare to make a move. Zheng Wei had been beaten up, and a piece of his flesh had been cut off. Although this was the mystic realm, the crime of failing to protect Luo Yunyang would be enough to make them suffer. After all, the wrath of the sky-shaking divine nation wasn't something that ordinary people could bear. After all, Zhenwei was the divine son of the sky-shaking divine nation and the successor of the divine emperor. In the past, there had been many batches of guards who had made mistakes while protecting Zhenwei. The lightest punishment had been banishment to the border or imprisonment. The most severe punishment had been death. Martial gods might be valuable in other factions, but in the eyes of the sky-shaking divine nation, they were worthless like pigs and dogs compared to Zhenwei. The only thing they could do now was follow Yi Hao's temper and reduce the damage to Zhenwei as much as possible. This way, they could at least reduce the punishment that the sky-shaking divine nation would give them. Everyone exchanged glances. Their eyes were filled with displeasure as they glared at Yi Hao and knelt down. Chapter 549. No way. Everyone turned their heads away, unwilling to look at Yi Hao. They were afraid that they wouldn't be able to control themselves and would attack Yi Hao. Come on, I want to hear slapping, Yi Hao said with a smile. What does it have to do with us if you want to hear slapping? Everyone was stunned when they heard Yi Hao's special request. Some of them even felt like their heads were cramping. Everyone 1,000 slaps. I'll cut off a piece of his flesh if I miss a single one. Yi Hao smiled as he scanned the crowd. Everyone's mood didn't improve at all when they saw Yi Hao's smile. Don't go too far. Little Xen glared at Yi Hao gloomily and nearly shouted. You can slap him 10,000 times. You can think about it yourself if you miss a single one. Yi Hao liked to stick his neck out like this. He could take revenge for Zhuge Liang's punch. Little Xen wanted to retort, but when he saw the smile on Yi Hao's face, he was worried that Yi Hao would increase the number of slaps. So, he swallowed the words that were at the tip of his tongue. It wasn't that he didn't dare to resist, but that Zhenwei's flesh would be cut off. If Zhenwei really had his flesh cut off because of him, then he would really be on the same path. He now regretted jumping out to speak. When they saw that little Xen wanted to slap them 10,000 times, those who wanted to slap them 1,000 times actually felt relieved. Slap, slap, slap. Everyone immediately started slapping their own faces left and right. Instantly, a chaotic mess of slapping sounds rang out. They felt that this was the greatest humiliation they had ever suffered in their lives. They might as well kill them all right now. This was simply torture. However, Zhenwei was in Yi Hao's hands. Even if they wanted to cry, they had to keep it in their hearts. Wait a minute. Yi Hao suddenly spoke up to stop them as they were slapping their own faces. Everyone looked at Yi Hao bitterly. They wanted to know what other tricks Yi Hao had in mind. If looks could kill, Yi Hao would probably have died 10,000 times by now. You guys don't have any rhythm at all. Can't you guys be more orderly and have some rhythm? Yi Hao said with a smile. Damn you, you still have to listen to the rhythm of your face slapping? Can you not torture me like this? Hearing Yi Hao's words, everyone was so angry that they almost jumped up. They couldn't help but curse in their hearts. If there's no rhythm, I won't be happy listening to it. My hands might tremble. It won't be good if I accidentally hurt someone. The dagger in Yi Hao's hand kept moving around Zhenwei's body and finally stopped at Zhenwei's crotch. Sensing the position of the dagger in Yi Hao's hand, Zhenwei instantly forgot the pain in his body and straightened his body. Although this was a mystic realm, he was still afraid of leaving behind any repercussions. If he could not get it up in the future, that would be a tragedy. Can you move your dagger away a little? Zhenwei said nervously. There was a hint of flattery in his tone. Zhenwei finally knew fear now. After all, as the godson of heaven of the Myriad Lands continent, he had all the beauties in the world. After all, what kind of woman wouldn't obediently throw herself into his arms after knowing his identity? At the same time, he also liked women very much. If he really couldn't get it up because of this, then what was the point of living? Why aren't you guys listening to him? Slap more rhythmically. After speaking, Zhenwei sternly ordered little Xen and the others. Fine. They had already received Yi Hao's threat. Now that they had Zhenwei's order, how would they dare to disobey? One by one, they began to try and coordinate with the slapping sounds of the people around them. Gradually, the slapping sounds slowly overlapped. In an instant, clear and loud slapping sounds rang out. Only then did Yi Hao nod his head in satisfaction. Seeing Yi Hao's satisfied expression, everyone finally heaved a sigh of relief. Everyone's faces were bitter. They probably never thought that there would be a day when they would have to slap their own mouths to see someone else's satisfaction. Come, follow my rhythm. Gang up on him, gang up on him. Wah! Seeing everyone slapping their own mouths, Yi Hao felt a rare pleasure in his heart. However, it didn't mean that he would let these people off easily. One had to know that Yi Hao had seen how arrogant these people were at the beginning. In the past, who knew how many honest and weak people had been bullied by them. Yi Hao naturally wanted to teach these people a lesson. Yi Hao couldn't help but recall a song from his previous life and gave everyone an example. Hearing Yi Hao's rhythm, everyone was extremely unwilling, but they still consciously followed him. Damn, you're even better than me. Hearing everyone's rhythmic slapping sounds, Junwei couldn't help but widen his eyes. He thought that he was very good at bullying people. After all, there were many people he didn't like who would naturally be bullied to death by him. However, he didn't expect Yi Hao to be able to bully people to this extent. If it weren't for the fact that he had a grudge against Yi Hao, he almost wanted to have a discussion with Yi Hao. However, Yi Hao hit him today and even cut his flesh. He bullied him because he was his subordinate. Zheng Wei had to take revenge for this. He wanted Yi Hao to know how serious the consequences of provoking him were. He wanted Yi Hao to bear the wrath of the entire Zhentian divine nation. He wanted everyone and everything that had anything to do with Yi Hao to disappear from the face of the earth. This wasn't him boasting. It was simply too easy for the Zhentian divine nation to do. He had already taken a fancy to a woman of the Holy Dynasty's holy son because he didn't like that holy son. The entire Holy Dynasty disappeared from the Myriad Kingdom continent overnight. As for that woman, she naturally became his object. As for that holy son, he received all kinds of torture and couldn't even beg for death. In the end, he was tortured to the point of schizophrenia and became neither human nor ghost. My lord, this. Hearing everyone's rhythmic slapping sounds, Zhuge Liang didn't know how to describe it. His lore was too awesome. He only felt that it was especially satisfying to watch little Xian slap people's faces. Come on, hand over all your valuables. Yi Hao suddenly spoke up as he watched the crowd slapping their faces excitedly. You're actually a robber? Hearing Yi Hao's words, everyone nearly vomited a mouthful of blood. One must know that although everyone's soul could enter this secret realm, they could bring in things from the real world. If those things disappeared, they would also disappear in the real world. Hurry up and hand over your spatial storage equipment. Yi Hao swept his gaze over the spatial rings on everyone's hands. He believed that these people, as martial gods and people of the divine nation, must have a lot of good things in their hands. After all, he had already offended them. Yi Hao no longer hesitated and might as well offend them thoroughly. Little Xian and the others felt their hearts ache. However, they still reluctantly took off their spatial rings. Zhuge Liang, search them. Yi Hao didn't believe that these people would be so honest. Chapter 550. Sure enough, after a while, Zhuge Liang found some spatial equipment on them. Kill them. Yi Hao knew that Zhuge Liang's cultivation time was almost up, so he immediately sent a voice transmission. Zhuge Liang hardened his heart and immediately obeyed Yi Hao's order. In the blink of an eye, everyone was killed. Even when they died, they did not know what was going on. Ding dong. Congratulations to host for obtaining 1 billion dragon power. Ding dong. Congratulations to host for obtaining 1 billion dragon power. Ding dong. Congratulations to host for obtaining 800 million dragon power. Ding dong. Congratulations to host for obtaining 1 billion and 10 billion dragon power. Ding dong. Congratulations to host for obtaining 1 billion and 95 billion dragon power. Ding dong. Congratulations to host for obtaining 1 billion and 5 billion dragon power. Ding dong. Congratulations to host for obtaining 1 billion dragon power. The system rang more than 20 times before it finally stopped. What? Is this for real? Yi Hao was extremely excited and could not believe it. After all, the total amount of dragon power was more than 20 billion. After killing these martial gods, he had obtained more dragon power than all the dragon power he had obtained before. Now, he had more than 30 billion dragon power in total. What Yi Hao did not know was that he had once again caused a sensation in the outside world. According to the calculation, after reaching 10 billion dragon power, one could be promoted to a theocracy. However, under the control of the four theocracies, no country dared to break 10 billion dragon power because it was purely suicidal. Because the four theocracies were too powerful, even imperial dynasties had to prepare for thousands of years before they dared to do so. Moreover, they had to have a good relationship with the theocracies, just like Yun Tsang and Bing Yuan. But that was because there were many theocracies and they were very competitive, so they had such an opportunity. Theocracies were different. No matter how fierce the competition between the four theocracies was, there was one thing that they especially agreed on. That was the level of theocracies. Now, that the four theocracies had the momentum of dividing the world into four, they did not want to see other forces promote to theocracies. Whoever did so would have to face the wrath of the four theocracies. Before that, the four divine nations had wiped out quite a number of top-notch sacred dynasties. That was why many of the top sacred dynasties in the Four Fiend Alliance were stuck at 9 billion dragon power. However, he didn't dare to exceed 10 billion. That was because 10 billion was the bottom line of the four divine nations. It was the line of death. For Yi Hao to do such a thing, it meant that Yi Hao had declared war on the four god nations. Therefore, in the 10,000 land continent, even more people wanted to know what ability Yi Hao had to do this. Because Yi Hao had brought them too much shock. Everyone looked at the remaining two lists in the sky quietly. One was the blood-red random entry list, and the other was the Empire list. Now, only these two lists were left in the sky. Even the Divine Kingdom list had disappeared. Looking at the 30 billion points of dragon energy behind the name of the Fire Dragon Empire, everyone felt like they were dreaming. After all, they had all mocked the Fire Dragon Empire in the beginning because the Fire Dragon Empire only had 14 points of dragon power. How could they not mock them for daring to go against the Empire? But in less than a month's time, the Fire Dragon Empire's dragon power had increased from 14 points to 30 billion. It was as if the Fire Dragon Empire was slapping them in the face with their strength. You actually dared to kill them. You must be crazy. Seeing Zhuge Liang kill all of his subordinates, Zhen Wei roared crazily. At this moment, even Zhen Wei felt as if his heart was dripping blood. That was because he had obtained that dragon power by slaughtering a saint-level secret realm with his own hands. That was 20 billion dragon power. Even for the Jintian Divine Nation, 20 billion dragon power wasn't a small amount. Since he had already destroyed the saint-level secret realm, he didn't care about the emperor-level secret realm at all. However, how could he have imagined that he would fail in this emperor stage region that he looked down upon? And it was an extremely tragic defeat. He had suffered the greatest humiliation of his life, losing 20 billion dragon power. Moreover, all of his subordinates had been killed at this moment, and he had fallen into the hands of Yi Hao. Hand over the origin fragment. Yi Hao ignored Zhen Wei's madness and said directly. Hearing Yi Hao's words, Zhen Wei felt guilty and couldn't help but avert his gaze. Origin fragment? What's an origin fragment? I've never heard of it. Don't pretend with me. How did you get here without the origin fragment? Yi Hao looked at Zhen Wei mockingly. Zhen Wei frowned. Although he didn't know the specific function of this origin fragment, he had a feeling that this origin fragment was definitely not an ordinary item. Originally, he was still imagining that Yi Hao didn't know about the origin fragment. Who knew that Yi Hao actually knew about it? Hurry up and hand it over. Save yourself from physical pain. Even if you kill this divine son, I won't hand it over. Hearing Yi Hao's words, Zhen Wei's tone was unyielding. This was because he had a feeling that this origin fragment might be able to change the situation of the Myriad Kingdom continent. It was very important to Jintian Divine Kingdom. For this origin fragment, even if he had to sacrifice his life, he wouldn't hesitate. Sky-devouring rats, teach him a lesson. After Yi Hao finished speaking, a group of sky-devouring rats immediately surrounded him. Looking at the sky-devouring rats that were drooling over him, Zhenwei's eyes were filled with fear. "You devil, you lunatic!" Zhenwei tried to use curses to ease the fear in his heart. "Noble divine son, these sky-devouring rats don't hurt when they bite people. No, just kill this divine son. Don't worry, it's not that easy to die. No matter what, you have to play for 10 days to half a month. You'll die a horrible death if you torture this divine son like this. Oh, haven't you tortured others before?" Hearing Yi Hao's words, Zhenwei instantly fell silent. Because what Yi Hao said was right, he had also tortured countless people. Because as long as he didn't like someone, he would torture them to death. If Zhuge Liang hadn't appeared at the beginning, he would have also tortured Yi Hao because he didn't like Yi Hao. As long as he didn't like someone, he would kill them. But he didn't expect that things would develop to this point. But now, he could finally understand the feelings of those who were tortured by him. At this moment, Zhenwei's heart was filled with fear. After all, a group of green-eyed rats surrounded you and wanted to bite you. Anyone would feel fear. Chapter 551. Hearing Yi Hao's words, Zhenwei could hear the squeaks of the rats from time to time. Forget it. So what if I give it to him? Who can take away something that belongs to Jintian Kingdom? Zhenwei thought to himself. Squeaka! Suddenly, a sky-devouring rat squeaked and bit Zhenwei's thigh. Zhenwei couldn't take it anymore and cried out. Zhenwei held his thigh and cried out in pain. When had he ever suffered such a serious injury? In Zhenwei's heart, there was only hatred for Yi Hao. However, he was all alone now, and there was nothing he could do. "I'll give it to you. I'll give it to you," Zhenwei said bitterly as he broke out in cold sweat. The current Zhenwei was no longer as arrogant and despotic as he was at the beginning. "You should have given it to me earlier. Why did you have to suffer so much? Don't you think so, divine son?" Yi Hao said with a smile. If he had relied on himself, he might not have dared to enter the sage secret realm, let alone the god's secret realm. If he went there alone, he would be courting death. However, he didn't expect that someone would deliver it to him. Zhenwei reluctantly took out the 2 origin fragments from the spatial pendant. When Yi Hao saw the 2 origin fragments in Zhenwei's hands, a smile appeared on his face. This was because Zhenwei had 2 complete origin fragments in his hands. Yi Hao immediately took the origin fragments. Ding dong! Congratulations to the host for obtaining an origin fragment. Congratulations to the host for obtaining 800 million experience points. Ding dong! Congratulations to the host for obtaining an origin fragment. Congratulations to the host for obtaining 900 million experience points. Ding dong! Congratulations to the host for leveling up. Ding dong! Congratulations to the host for leveling up. Eat him, Yi Hao said to the sky-devouring rat as he pulled down Zhenwei's space pendant. According to Zhenwei's character, even if Yi Hao let him go, he wouldn't let Yi Hao go. Yi Hao might as well add more fear to Zhenwei's heart. "No, you don't keep your word." Zhenwei immediately shouted when he heard Yi Hao's words. As for Zhenwei's subsequent curses, Yi Hao did not care at all. Instead, he flew into the void with Zhuge Liang. Just as I expected, it's an origin source fragment. Yi Hao looked at the origin source fragment in front of him and felt slightly disappointed. Yi Hao put away the origin shards. Ding dong, source dregs can be fused into source fragments. Do you wish to fuse them? Fuse. Yi Hao had just put away the origin shards when the system's notification rang out. Ding dong, congratulations to the host for obtaining an origin source fragment. Currently, there are 6 origin source fragments. The host is rewarded with a chance to draw a lottery. It's time to leave this place. Yi Hao glanced at the void and was about to leave. But at this moment, the void suddenly changed and 9 continents appeared. The 9 continents were of different shapes, and 6 of them were shining brightly. Yi Hao looked at the 6 shining continents and felt a sense of familiarity. It's an origin fragment. Yi Hao suddenly thought of it and immediately looked into the infinite space ring. Where are my origin source fragments? Yi Hao was surprised to find that all the origin source fragments in the infinite space ring had disappeared. Yi Hao was very anxious. After all, it was related to him unifying the infinite lands. At the same time, it was also related to whether he could complete the task. Yi Hao immediately looked at the 6 shining continents. He found that the 6 continents had disappeared and 6 origin source fragments appeared in their place. Yi Hao immediately flew over. At this moment, the 6 origin source fragments suddenly moved and flew toward him. The origin source fragments were so fast that Yi Hao could not see them clearly. He only felt a pain in one of his fingers. Is this origin source fragment recognizing its master? Yi Hao looked at the origin source fragment and saw a trace of his blood. Suddenly, Yi Hao's vision blurred and a void appeared in front of him. There were countless balls of light in the void. Finally, his eyes fell on a tiny ball of light. Could this be the power of the origin source on the infinite lands? Yi Hao looked at the red ball of light. Because Yi Hao saw that a few areas on the ball of light were the same as his own origin source fragment. The scene changed. A barren land appeared in front of Yi Hao. There were only a few wild beasts on the land. But the actions of the wild beasts shocked Yi Hao. Every sneeze of the wild beasts would form a tornado. Every step that the wild beasts took would leave a huge footprint on the land. Are these still wild beasts? These divine-level magical beasts are nothing more than this. Yi Hao looked at this scene in shock. Slowly, the land began to change. There were more and more wild beasts. But at the same time, these wild beasts had returned to normal. And those powerful wild beasts were nowhere to be seen. At this moment, the sky suddenly changed. The entire land was shrouded in black haze. Are those people? Yi Hao looked at the people walking out from the black haze. They were all wearing different kinds of armor. There were men and women in this group. But without exception, these people were all very young. They looked a bit like young masters and young ladies who were training. A few of them whispered and were about to rush into the void and grab the power of the origin source of this world. They wanted to take it for themselves. But at this moment, the land suddenly shook and more than a dozen wild beasts appeared. Yi Hao was shocked. He recognized these wild beasts. They were the wild beasts that appeared before. Those wild beasts roared at the sky. Suddenly, all the wild beasts in the infinite lands were boiling. And when those young masters and young ladies saw this scene, their faces became serious. Those people whispered again and actually took the initiative to attack the wild beasts. What a powerful saber! What a powerful sword! Yi Hao saw 2 of them. They slashed out with their saber and stabbed with their sword. They actually destroyed tens of millions of wild beasts. And the entire land below them, the mountains and rivers instantly shattered and the seawater evaporated. Even the sky was torn open. What realm is this? Seeing the 2 people's seemingly simple but profound attacks, Yi Hao was so shocked that he couldn't speak to himself. Ding dong! Congratulations to the host for comprehending the superficial knowledge of one sword martial technique. Martial technique, level, super heaven stage. Ding dong! Congratulations to the host for comprehending the superficial knowledge of one sword martial technique. Martial technique, level, super heavenly tribulation. Seeing the 2 people's attack movements, Yi Hao's mind rang out. Super heaven stage. Yi Hao didn't expect that the 2 of them only used a simple sword and a simple saber. They actually surpassed the heaven stage martial technique. One had to know that the strongest martial technique in the infinite lands was only a heaven stage martial technique. It should be that this saber and sword have exceeded the tolerance of this world. Otherwise, it would be impossible for it to be a heaven stage martial technique. Yi Hao looked at the shattered sky and analyzed. Chapter 552. In the blink of an eye, the dozen or so wild beasts became tens of thousands of meters in size. One by one, they opened their bloody mouths and attacked the dozen or so young men and women. The dozen or so wild beasts were actually evenly matched with the dozen or so people. This speed is simply... Seeing the battle between the people and the beasts, Yi Hao was speechless. Because the movements of those people and beasts seemed to be very slow, but in fact, they were extremely fast. Yi Hao suddenly felt a severe headache. Watching the battle made his head feel like it was about to explode. After an unknown period of time, Yi Hao saw that the myriad kingdom continent in front of him had completely changed. After the baptism of war, the entire myriad kingdom continent was shattered, and its original appearance could not be seen at all. It was hard to imagine that this myriad kingdom continent, which was countless times larger than Earth, had been shattered by a dozen or so people and a dozen or so wild beasts. Human-shaped tanks were no longer enough to describe the combat strength of these people. They were all living human-shaped atomic bombs. After an unknown period of time, the dozen or so wild beasts were completely slaughtered, and a dozen or so men and women were basically all seriously injured. The last dozen or so people walked toward the origin power, but at this moment, the scene in front of them disappeared. Why is it gone? Yi Hao's curiosity had just been piqued. After all, the shock from the previous scene reached the depths of his soul. Of course, the harvest was also huge. He had obtained 2 super heaven-ranked martial skills, but he really wanted to know what happened next. Why did magical beasts appear on the myriad kingdom continent and so many countries appear? Why did the origin fragment shatter? And most importantly, who were those dozen or so people, and where did they go? But the scene was frozen just like that. Could it be that I need to find the remaining 3 fragments to unlock these secrets? Yi Hao guessed. He was now a little impatient and wanted to find the remaining 3 fragments as soon as possible. And the remaining 3 fragments, one of them might be in the Beast Roar Valley. But Yi Hao really did not know about the remaining 2 fragments. If he really wanted to fight in a myriad kingdom continent, looking for the 2 fragments was undoubtedly like looking for a needle in a haystack. Let's go back first. Yi Hao moved his mind and directly stored the 6 fragments into the space. Greetings, my lord. Within the palace of the Fire Dragon Empire, everyone recovered from their shock when they saw Yi Hao appear out of thin air and greeted him. You may rise. Fire Emperor, General Chun Ziqiao, and General Sun, how's the progress? Yi Hao swept his gaze across everyone as he asked in a low voice. Reporting to your majesty, the 3 generals are attacking quickly. They have taken all the territories of the Hishan camp under their command. Li Hong immediately stood up and reported. The way Li Hong looked at Yi Hao now was completely different. His eyes were filled with respect and admiration for Yi Hao. Thinking back to a few years ago, Yi Hao was just a useless prince. Meanwhile, the Fire Dragon Empire was plagued by internal and external troubles. Later on, something happened to Yi Batian. He thought that the Fire Dragon Empire was finished. But who would have thought that Yi Hao would suddenly rise to power? In just a few short years, the trend and speed of development was something that he couldn't keep up with. Moreover, the Fire Dragon Empire was getting stronger and stronger. Even the imperial court could be destroyed by Yi Hao. Moreover, he destroyed more than 30 of them at once. Sigh, it seems like I'm really old and can't keep up with my lord's pace. If my lord knew all of this, he would definitely be very pleased. Li Hong sighed. After all, the Fire Dragon Empire was so big, and there were countless elites in the imperial court. However, as the head of the civil officials, he felt powerless. Thinking of this, Li Hong seemed to have made up his mind. He stood up and said, Your Majesty, I'm old and would like to retire and return to my hometown. Please allow me. What? Lordly, you can't do this. Lordly has worked hard and the Fire Dragon Empire has just started. How can you retire and return to your hometown at this time? My lord, we can't agree to Lord Li's request. It could be seen that Li Hong still had a lot of prestige in the imperial court. As soon as Li Hong finished speaking, many officials immediately stood up and spoke up. However, there were also many people whose eyes were shining brightly. Yi Hao glanced at Li Hong and realized that Li Hong had indeed aged a lot after not seeing him for a few years. When he thought about how he had always relied on Li Hong to manage the imperial court, he felt that he had indeed mistreated Li Hong. After all, Li Hong was an old official. For him to stand up for him at such an important time showed his loyalty. Moreover, the smooth running of the Fire Dragon Empire was mostly due to Li Hong's efforts. However, if he agreed to Li Hong's request now, he wouldn't be able to find a suitable candidate. He could rely on the system to summon a few civil officials. However, if they were appointed to important positions, even if the subordinates didn't say it out loud, they would still feel estranged. Thinking of this, he couldn't agree to Li Hong's request. Let's talk about this later. Yi Hao waved his hand and said perfunctorily, "Have the three imperial courts of emperor when made any moves?" Li Hong still wanted to say something, but seeing Yi Hao's attitude, he could only hold his tongue for the time being. Many people smiled when they saw Yi Hao's way of doing things. However, there were still some people who, although they were smiling, had a hint of disappointment in their eyes. They looked at Li Hong's back view with jealousy. Yi Hao scanned the hall and realized that there were thousands of officials, but most of them were new faces. It was obvious that he wasn't doing a good job as the emperor. Furthermore, at this very moment, Yi Hao noticed the changes in everyone's expressions. It seems that Li Hong has suffered a lot in this position. After all, it must be very difficult for an old man who is only a marshal general to manage so many young and rebellious youths. At this thought, a person suddenly appeared in Yi Hao's mind. It was the first woman he met when he first came to this world. Thinking about it now, Yi Hao couldn't help but smile. At this moment, when the civil and military officials saw Yi Hao suddenly smile, they were all curious as to why Yi Hao was in such a good mood. "By the way, Prime Minister Li, where's your daughter? Is she married?" Yi Hao smiled and looked at Li Hong. For some reason, when Yi Hao asked this question, he felt a little nervous. The question was unintentional, but the listener was interested. All the officials in the hall were instantly excited. "What's going on? Could it be that His Majesty has taken a fancy to Lord Li's daughter? I heard that Lord Li's daughter has grown up to be beautiful and elegant. She's a good match for His Majesty. His Majesty is already in his early 20s. It's time for him to marry a concubine." Chapter 553. Everyone was whispering among themselves as they looked at Li Hong enviously, waiting for Li Hong's reply. Many of them were even looking forward to Li Ura getting married. After all, Yi Hao was the emperor of the 9 and 5. Moreover, he was handsome and had yet to have a concubine. If their daughters could become Yi Hao's concubine, they would probably wake up laughing in their dreams. However, each and every one of them knew their own limits. How could their daughters be worthy of Yi Hao? But Li Hong was different. His position in the court was already stable. If his daughters were to marry Yi Hao, no one would be able to shake Li Hong's position. When Li Hong heard Yi Hao's words, he felt like he was in a dream, because his daughter was already of marriageable age. However, in his eyes, there was no one that could compare to Yi Hao. From the beginning, he had wanted to ask Yi Hao to make Li Ura his concubine. But Yi Hao had not been in the Fire Dragon Empire all this while. Moreover, the Fire Dragon Empire was growing stronger and stronger. And all this was done by Yi Hao alone. So in his opinion, his daughter was increasingly not good enough for Yi Hao. So he suppressed this thought in his heart. But he did not expect Yi Hao to ask this question in front of all the civil and military officials in the court. No matter what Yi Hao was thinking, at the very least, if Yi Hao mentioned his daughter, it meant that he was interested in his daughter. Li Hong was so excited that he could not speak. "Old Li, why are you in a daze?" Cheng Yao Jin, who was standing beside him, reminded him anxiously. Because of Li Ura, he had even cheated Li Hong of a bottle of wine. Now that Yi Hao had taken the initiative to bring it up, how could he not seize the opportunity? He knew that this could kill him. Staying up too late was Li Hong's wish all along. Zhou, who was also the right prime minister, also pulled Li Hong's shoulder anxiously and kept talking to him. He winked at Li Hong. Municipal government, body, one had to know that he and Li Hong were truly a pair of fellow sufferers. No matter how much pressure there was in the imperial court, the two of them had to bear it. No matter how much hardship there was, they had to bear it. Naturally, he was willing to see Li Hong make a name for himself. "Master, my daughter." Li Hong had just calmed down and was very excited. "Mood, speak." Before he could finish his sentence, Yi Hao interrupted him. "Forget it." Hearing Yi Hao's words, Li Hong's heart skipped a beat. Could it be that he had answered too late and had angered Her Majesty? Li Hong was nervous and regretful. If he had known, he would have answered earlier. And Yi Hao's "forget it" immediately raised the tension in the hall. And some people actually began to rejoice in their hearts. This was because Li Hong had taken over the position of prime minister. If Li Ura became Yi Hao's woman, then they would have no chance to make a name for themselves. Right hand, left hand, but if Li Hong angered Yi Hao, then everything would be fine. Just as everyone was guessing, Yi Hao suddenly stood up and said with a smile, "I think I should go and see Yu Luo myself." Everyone was clearly stunned again. For Yi Hao to make a personal appearance, even if Yi Hao did not fancy Li Ura, no one would believe it. Just as everyone was in a daze, Yi Hao had already left the hall. In the past few years, the Fire Dragon Empire had been constantly changing. The imperial capital of the Fire Dragon Empire was naturally developing rapidly as well. It looked different every day. To be honest, Yi Hao had never been free to wander around. The current imperial capital of the Fire Dragon Empire was definitely not inferior to the imperial capital of any other empire. The imperial capital of the Fire Dragon Empire could accommodate more than 100 million people just in terms of population. And all the soldiers of the Fire Dragon Empire added up to more than 10 million people. Of course, in terms of quality, there might be a slight deficiency. But to be able to develop an imperial capital with a population of less than 1 million and soldiers of less than 200,000 in a few years, it was already very difficult to develop to today's situation. To dare say that in the entire 10,000 land continent, there were only a handful of people who could do what the Fire Dragon Empire had done. Yi Hao shuttled through the crowd of people in the imperial capital. Looking at the endless stream of people, Yi Hao could not help but feel as if it was a lifetime ago. He felt as if he had returned to a big city. That kind of crowded feeling was only different in terms of clothing and environment. There was an endless stream of people coming and going on the streets, and the sound of hawking could be heard everywhere. And from time to time, a small group of patrolling guards would pass by. Seeing this scene, Yi Hao was very satisfied in his heart. This was all due to the efforts of those ministers. "Hello, uncle. May I ask where Prime Minister Li's house is?" He did not know if he did not come out, but once he came out, Yi Hao felt awkward. He could not help but regret not bringing a guard with him, because the current imperial palace had developed too much, and it was completely different from what he remembered. So in other words, he could not find where Li Hong's house was. Since he could not find Li Hong's house, then it was impossible to find Li Ura. "Young man, why are you looking for Prime Minister Li? Who are you?" The old man looked suspiciously at Yi Hao and asked vigilantly. Because the Fire Dragon Empire was developing rapidly, it naturally attracted a lot of rascals. In the imperial capital of the Fire Dragon Empire, there had already been a lot of assassinations, and Li Hong was an honest and upright official. He did not do it for fame and fortune, but for the people wholeheartedly. He had indeed done a lot of good things. So the old man's heart was also on Li Hong's side. "Oh, I am Prime Minister Li's student. I specially came to the imperial capital to pay my respects to my esteemed teacher." Yi Hao lied casually. After all, if he revealed his true identity, the old man might not believe him. "Then I advise you to go back. Prime Minister Li has never sought personal gain for his own people. It will be a waste of time if you go." The old man somewhat believed Yi Hao's words, but he still tried to persuade Yi Hao. This was because many of Li Hong's disciples had gone to Li Hong to ask for an official position, but they had all been coaxed away by Li Hong. In Li Hong's words, "Either you rely on your own ability to get an official position, or don't say that you know me." I find embarrassing. So in the old man's opinion, Yi Hao was also the kind of person who came to take advantage of opportunities. Yi Hao did not expect the old man to be so quick-witted and considerate. He just wanted to ask for directions. Why was it so difficult? However, from the old man's attitude, he could analyze that Li Hong had a good reputation among the people. This made Yi Hao feel very gratified. Just as Yi Hao was about to ask more questions, a young man's voice suddenly interrupted his thoughts. "Miss Li, just agree to my request." Yi Hao immediately looked over curiously and saw a white-clothed young lady and a hedonistic young man entering his sight. Meanwhile, Yi Hao's gaze was fixed on a young girl. "Li Ura, That's right. The young girl was Li Ura. Li Ura had become even more slender and elegant in the past few years. She was dressed in white and looked like a floating immortal. Moreover, her beautiful face was almost flawless. However, Li Ura did not seem to be in a good mood. Her eyes were filled with disgust as she looked at the young master. Chapter 554. When everyone heard Yi Hao's voice, they all looked at Yi Hao curiously. They wanted to know who dared to go against eldest young Master Wang. This eldest young Master Wang's name was Wang Haitao. He wasn't originally from the Fire Dragon Empire. He was the young master of an imperial family. Later on, his entire family moved to the Fire Dragon Empire's imperial capital. His family developed very well in the Fire Dragon Empire. There were even many officials from the Wang family. After all, the Wang family was an imperial power. If they were willing to join the Fire Dragon Empire, how could anyone in the Fire Dragon Empire object? Moreover, the Wang family's strong economic and military strength could be of great help to the Fire Dragon Empire. Naturally, the Wang family became a tyrant in the imperial capital. Ordinary people didn't dare to provoke them. Wang Haitao relied on his family's strength to be even more unscrupulous in the Yanlong imperial capital. Many people didn't want to provoke the Wang family, so they could only turn a blind eye. When Wang Haitao first came to the Yanlong imperial capital, he wasn't so arrogant. But now, Wang Haitao had become the #1 young master in the imperial capital. Countless people wanted to curry favor with him. When Wang Haitao first came to the Fire Dragon Empire, he saw Li Ura. When he first saw Li Ura, he was already stunned. He didn't expect that there would be such a beauty in the world. Thus, from that moment on, he had made up his mind to obtain Li Ura. But Li Ura wasn't someone to be trifled with. Although the Wang family was powerful, they were now under the Fire Dragon Empire. They belonged to the Fire Dragon Empire. Li Hong was indeed the #1 civil official in the Fire Dragon Empire. He was the current prime minister. Even the Wang family didn't dare to provoke him. However, that didn't mean that he would give up. That was why he kept pestering her to win Li Ura's heart. However, Li Ura had been giving him the cold shoulder, which made him very unhappy. However, his father had warned him that he could not force Li Ura, so he could only obey. However, he was very confident that he would be able to catch up to Li Ura, because in the imperial city, no one would dare to fight over Li Ura. Therefore, in his opinion, catching up with Li Ura was only a matter of time. He had long regarded Li Ura as his exclusive property. But at this time, someone actually dared to interrupt him while he was flirting with a girl. He even said that Li Ura was his woman. Wasn't this a blatant provocation? Wang Haitao's expression immediately became gloomy. There was actually someone who dared to undermine him in the imperial capital. That person must be tired of living. It's over. This kid is finished. Of all the people he could have provoked, he actually dared to provoke young Master Wang. This kid is obviously an outsider. A hero saving a damsel in distress. He should also observe the situation. This time, this kid is dead for sure. No one who provokes young Master Wang will have a good ending. Moreover, Misty is here. Young Master Wang will definitely have to put on a good show. At this moment, the crowd gathered around and looked at Yi Hao with pity. In their opinion, Yi Hao dared to provoke Wang Haitao, which meant that he was doomed. Kid, hurry up and run. Sigh. The old man glanced at Yi Hao, then sighed and retreated. This was because the old man was also afraid of getting into trouble. Wang Haitao was too domineering. How could a commoner like him offend him? Not to mention others, even the current prime minister, Li Hong, had to turn a blind eye to Wang Haitao. Otherwise, why would the Li family not do anything when Wang Haitao kept harassing Li Ura? That was because although the Li family had a high status in the Fire Dragon Empire, they were far inferior to the Wang family in terms of martial strength. Men, break this reckless kid's legs. Wang Haitao smiled coldly and waved his hand. As Wang Haitao waved his hand, more than 20 hired thugs immediately rushed out from the crowd. All of them were martial venerables. They were dressed in black with the word Wang written on them. Everyone's expression changed when they saw this group of hired thugs. Because of the aura emitted by these hired thugs, no one dared to move recklessly, because to them, martial venerables were too high to reach. Kid, kneel down. One of the hired thugs looked at Yi Hao disdainfully, then clenched his fist and rushed toward Yi Hao. He did not take Yi Hao seriously at all. After all, looking at Yi Hao's age, it was impossible for him to have a high cultivation level. Moreover, they were already used to this kind of thing. They had often helped Wang Haitao teach people a lesson. When they saw the hired thugs attack, no one could bear to watch this scene. Many people even looked away. Li Yuare's attention was also attracted. She turned to look at Yi Hao to see who he was, but her line of sight was blocked by the hired thugs. However, Li Yuare did not mind. After all, Yi Hao had just said that she was his woman. At first glance, she could tell that he was a frivolous person. Kid, why aren't you dodging? You're courting death. Seeing that Yi Hao did not dodge, the hired thug sneered and increased the strength of his fist. Crack! In an instant, the hired thug's fist landed on Yi Hao's body. On the other hand, Yi Hao was unharmed, but the hired thug's entire arm was crippled. Ah! The hired thug hugged his arm in pain and screamed loudly. Many of the people present did not manage to see what was going on. They originally thought that Yi Hao would be beaten up badly, but why was the hired thug the one who was injured? Wang Haitao's expression changed when he saw that his men were suddenly injured. He roared, "You bunch of good-for-nothings, attack him together." When the 20 hired thugs heard Wang Haitao's order, they could only brace themselves and charge forward. Yi Hao chuckled as he looked at these hired thugs. These hired thugs were only martial venerables. Even if he stood still, these hired thugs would not be able to break through his defense. Moreover, it would be fine if these thugs' attacks could not hurt him. Instead, they would hurt him. Sure enough, in the next instant, several of the hired thugs' fists landed on his body. Yi Hao only felt an itch. He did not feel any pain at all. On the other hand, the hired thugs' arms cracked. They hugged their arms and howled in pain. Since the hired thugs who charged forward first were hugging their arms and howling in pain, the hired thugs behind them did not see clearly what was happening. They only saw Yi Hao standing there with a calm expression on his face. They started to feel fear and did not dare to charge forward. They knew that they had been in the imperial city for a long time. This time, they finally met a tough opponent. "You bunch of good-for-nothings. The Wang family has raised you for nothing. Let me deal with him now," Wang Haitao said exasperatedly when he saw that his hired thugs were afraid to move forward. After all, this was in front of Li Yuare. If his men could not even deal with a young boy, it would be too embarrassing. He had always been very concerned about his reputation in front of beautiful women. Now, his men did not dare to charge forward. This made him feel very embarrassed. Moreover, he could already hear the discussions of the surrounding crowd. This. Li Yuare finally saw Yi Hao's face through the gaps between the hired thugs. He did not pay much attention to Yi Hao at first, but suddenly his gaze froze on Yi Hao's face. Chapter 555. Li Yuare immediately thought of that young man. She had accidentally met him in the palace, and that young man had taken up residence in her heart. That young man had already become the emperor of the Fire Dragon Empire. Furthermore, he had brought the Fire Dragon Empire from a small duchy to a dynasty that could destroy any dynasty. Furthermore, the dragon power of the country was already superior to that of any dynasty. That was the kind of man Li Yuare should have. On the other hand, the other young geniuses were utterly unable to enter her eyes when compared to Yi Hao. She had waited for several years, and the gap between her and Yi Hao had widened. In fact, she no longer had such thoughts in her heart. However, Yi Hao had just said that she was his woman. Li Yuare couldn't help but blush when she thought of this. However, Yi Hao had suddenly appeared in front of her, and she couldn't believe it for a moment. Yi Hao was much taller than before, and his body was also much more muscular than before. That handsome face of his had lost its youthfulness and was now filled with determination and confidence. She couldn't pull herself away from those deep eyes of his. Wang Haitao had also noticed the changes in Li Yuare, and he was instantly filled with jealousy. Li Yuare had never looked at him in the eye, but now she was looking at Yi Hao like a love-struck fool. How could he not be jealous? Bitch, I'll teach you a lesson when the time comes. Wang Haitao snorted coldly when he saw Li Yuer's appearance. Looking at Yi Hao's face, which was even more handsome than his own, Wang Haitao felt very unhappy. Elderly, help me teach that kid a lesson. Wang Haitao shouted into the air. An old man suddenly squeezed out of the crowd. The old man's footsteps were very steady as he walked to Wang Haitao's side and said respectfully, "Young master, teach that brat a lesson for me." Wang Haitao pointed at Yi Hao and said confidently. Elderly was a low-level emperor stage expert. Since Wang Haitao was the only direct descendant of the Wang clan, he naturally had to protect Zhou Dang. Therefore, the Wang clan sent out an emperor-level expert to protect Wang Haitao. In Yanlong's royal capital, he believed that with this emperor-level bodyguard, he could absolutely do whatever he wanted. If his family allowed it, he would even dare to barge into the imperial palace. As for Elderly, he had been hiding in the dark and would not make a move unless it was absolutely necessary. This was also his life-saving trump card. However, Yi Hao had completely angered him. That was why he revealed his trump card just to deal with Yi Hao. He wanted to regain some face in front of the beauty. Greetings, Elderly. Seeing Elderly appear, the thugs immediately saluted respectfully. Their eyes were filled with fear, and they even forgot about the pain. In fact, they were also surprised by Elderly's appearance. Because Elderly was one of the few experts in the Wang clan. Even they did not know that Old Li had been secretly protecting Wang Haitao all this time. However, they knew that now that Elderly had made a move, Yi Hao would definitely be finished. Elderly nodded slightly. He did not take these people seriously. Instead, he looked at Yi Hao. Strange. Elderly glanced at Yi Hao and muttered. Elderly realized that he could not see through Yi Hao's cultivation. Elderly was more knowledgeable and did not want to cause trouble for the Li clan. Young master, where are you from? What business do you have in Yanlong's royal capital? Wang Haitao's face showed a trace of displeasure at Elderly's question. Elderly, I asked you to take care of him, not to chat with him. This idiot. Elderly cursed in his heart. He thought that the family head was so wise and calculating. How could he give birth to such an idiot who only knew how to eat, drink, and play? However, he was the master. Elderly sighed and said politely to Yi Hao, "Then I'll have to offend you. You are no match for me," Yi Hao said softly. He found Elderly pleasing to the eye, so he kindly reminded him. Arrogant. More than arrogant. This was what everyone was thinking at this moment. Many people did not know Elderly's cultivation. However, if he was the trump card of the Wang clan to protect Wang Haitao, his cultivation could not be too weak. However, Yi Hao actually ignored such a person. Good boy, let me test your skills. Elderly did not take Yi Hao seriously at first. Although he could not see through Yi Hao's cultivation, he only thought that Yi Hao used a technique to hide his cultivation. After all, Yi Hao was still young. He never thought that Yi Hao's cultivation would surpass his. As the saying goes, even a clay bodhisattva has some anger. With his cultivation, he could do whatever he wanted in the Yanlong imperial city. Now, a young boy said that he was no match for Yi Hao. He decided to teach Yi Hao a lesson and not be too arrogant. Wang Haitao laughed secretly. At first, he was worried that Elderly would be merciful. However, Yi Hao was courting death by saying such words. He even dared to say that a first-order martial emperor was no match for him. He believed that with Elderly's temper, he would definitely teach Yi Hao a lesson. Don't! Li Yura screamed when she saw that Elderly was about to attack Yi Hao. Bitch, you only know how to protect the gigolo after a while. Wang Haitao glanced at Li Yura unhappily. He had already thought of countless ways to deal with this adulterous couple. Don't you care about him? When the time comes, I will personally beat him into a dog in front of you. Wang Haitao thought with a cold smile. Wang Haitao's heart was completely twisted at this moment. After all, as the young master of the Wang family, he was the treasure of the Wang family. He was an existence that would melt in the mouth. When had he ever been treated so differently? As he spoke, Elderly clenched his fist and smashed it towards Yi Hao's face. He's attacking. Everyone looked at Elderly nervously. However, They could only see a shadow and couldn't see Elder Lee's movements clearly. Back off! Yi Hao glanced at Elder Lee. He realized that Elder Lee was being merciful, so he didn't want to kill him. Similarly, he faced Elder Lee with one hand and directly grabbed Elder Lee's fist. Elder Lee was stunned. Although the strength of his punch couldn't kill an Emperor Wu, it could easily send an Emperor Wu flying. However, he was caught by Yi Hao just like that. Elder Lee fell as if his fist had hit cotton. He couldn't exert any strength at all. Elder Lee looked at Yi Hao in surprise. He saw that Yi Hao still looked relaxed and had a faint smile on his face. However, his gaze was fixed on Li Yura. Old man Li's heart instantly exploded because Yi Hao's disregard of him was the greatest insult to him. He actually had the leisure to look at beauties while fighting with him. "Get out of my way," Elder Lee roared. A dagger suddenly appeared in his empty hand and directly attacked Yi Hao's abdomen. In his opinion, if Yi Hao wasn't stupid, he would definitely let go of his hand. Chapter 556. At this moment, everyone was looking at Yi Hao in shock. Although they didn't know Elder Lee's cultivation level, as Wang Haitao's protector, he couldn't be too weak. An expert from an imperial force would at least be stronger than Emperor Wu. Although they didn't see the two's movements clearly, it was obvious that Elder Lee was at a disadvantage. Otherwise, Elder Lee wouldn't have been so calm and collected at the beginning to use his weapon in exasperation. The most shocked person was Wang Haitao, because he knew Elder Lee's strength very well. In Huangdu, there were only a handful of people who could force Elder Lee to use his sword. Is this kid really that strong? Wang Haitao looked at the young man who was about the same age as him suspiciously. "You guys go and help Elder Lee." Wang Haitao kicked the thugs' butts. He knew that he had kicked an iron plate today. However, this imperial city was his, Wang Haitao's, world. He absolutely could not tolerate others acting arrogantly in his territory. Even if it was the current emperor, he could not tolerate it. When the thugs heard Wang Haitao's command, they all drew their weapons and attacked Yi Hao. "Stop! Wang Haitao, you can't afford to offend him," Li Yura shouted anxiously when she saw so many people attacking Yi Hao. Wang Haitao said disdainfully, "Haha, there's no one in Huangdu that Wang Haitao, can't afford to offend." Wang Haitao looked at Li Yura mockingly and said with a smile, "Why do you like this kid? If you want to protect him, you don't have to use such a clumsy excuse." Li Yura wanted to immediately tell him Yi Hao's identity. However, Yi Hao came here alone. She was afraid that Yi Hao was deliberately hiding his identity, so she didn't dare to say it directly. Li Yura clutched the corner of his shirt nervously as he looked at Yi Hao. Yi Hao looked at Old Man Li. Old Man Li had suddenly used a weapon, and his eyes were filled with killing intent. Yi Hao's gaze turned cold. Those who dare to kill him must not be allowed to live. Thinking of this, Yi Hao slapped Elder Lee's wrist that was holding the dagger. Elder Lee was also shocked. He didn't expect Yi Hao to be so desperate. Instead of retreating, he approached Yi Hao. If this hand of his was grabbed by Yi Hao again, then he would really be at the mercy of Yi Hao. "Fight!" Elder Lee knew that now was not the time to retreat. Thinking of this, Elder Lee reacted quickly. He suddenly changed the direction of his dagger and lifted it upwards, trying to force Yi Hao's hand back. "So what if I let you attack me?" Yi Hao was not afraid of Elder Lee's dagger. Unless it was a sacred artifact, it would be very difficult to injure him. Yi Hao could not help but grab Elder Lee's dagger with his bare hands. Is this kid crazy? Elder Lee saw Yi Hao's actions. One had to know that his dagger was an emperor artifact. With his cultivation, he could definitely cripple Yi Hao's arm. "Since you were courting death, don't blame me." Elder Lee's gaze turned cold as he attacked Yi Hao's palm fiercely. Yi Hao channeled his martial arts power and grabbed the dagger. "Let go!" Yi Hao roared and snatched the dagger from Elder Lee's hand. Where's my dagger?" Elder Lee expected that Yi Hao's palm would be bleeding, but it didn't happen. He only felt his palm lighten and the dagger in his hand disappeared. Elder Lee panicked and wanted to retreat. However, a strong pulling force came from his left hand, and he felt his body being lifted into the air. Yi Hao looked at the thugs who were charging at him. He treated Elder Li as a human punching bag and threw him around. At this moment, the thugs had no chance to react at all. The sabers in their hands landed on Elder Li's body. Elder Li was lifted up by Yi Hao in an instant. He was clearly in a daze and could not even defend himself. Blood and flesh splattered everywhere. Who dares to attack me? I will kill him. Elder Li cried out in pain. However, the thugs did not hear him at all. They were all trying their best to block Yi Hao's human weapons. They could only block with the sabers in their hands. Stop it! Stop it! Wang Hai shouted in panic when he saw Elder Li being chopped up. Although Elder Li was his subordinate, he was also one of the few elites in the Wang family. If he was really chopped to death, it would be too much. But when he looked over, he saw that all the thugs had been sent flying. The surrounding crowd all hid far away, afraid that they would be accidentally injured. Yi Hao glanced at Elder Li, who was covered in blood, and threw him aside like trash. Elder Li panted heavily and stared at Yi Hao weakly. His eyes were filled with murderous intent. Die! Sensing the murderous intent in Elder Li's eyes, Yi Hao stepped on Elder Li's head. Crack! With a shattering sound, Old Man Li died immediately. Strong, he was too strong. Everyone looked at Yi Hao in shock. One person had defeated more than 20 martial venerables. Even Old Li, a first-order martial emperor expert, had been completely oppressed. It's over, it's over. Wang Hai's face turned pale when he saw Elder Li being killed. His body trembled violently, as if it had been sucked out of him. Brat, you are finished. My Wang family will not let you off. Wang Hai pointed at Yi Hao and said angrily, Is that so? Yi Hao smiled and looked at Wang Hai. Boom, boom, boom. Suddenly, a series of orderly footsteps were heard. Hundreds of well-equipped black armored soldiers charged into the middle of the crowd. Looking at the hundreds of black armored soldiers, the crowd immediately retreated to the side in fear. Wang Hai saw the black armored soldiers and revealed an excited expression. It's the Wang family's black armored soldiers. Someone in the crowd suddenly said, Greetings, eldest young master. Wang Taijun looked at the crowd and finally fixed his gaze on Wang Hai. He walked to Wang Hai's side and bowed respectfully. Uncle Wang, please rise. Wang Hai was very satisfied with Wang Tiejuan's timely appearance and quickly said with a humble attitude, Eldest young master, what is going on here? Wang Taijun frowned and looked at the thugs lying on the ground and wailing. It's him. It's that brat. He wants to kill me. Wang Hai pointed at Yi Hao in exasperation. Obviously, Wang Tiejuan's appearance gave him confidence. Wang Taijun was instantly enraged. How dare you? This is the imperial capital. There is actually someone who dares to look down on the Wang family. Where is the law? Hearing Wang Tiejuan's words, Yi Hao was enraged. His eyebrows were knitted together and his face turned ashen. He did not expect that there would be such a domineering family in the imperial capital. A small guard commander was already so arrogant. What kind of family was the Wang family? This Wang family is getting more and more overboard. It is obvious that they do not care about the emperor. You don't want to live anymore. Be careful not to let the black armored soldiers hear you. Sai, who asked our emperor not to be in the imperial capital? Otherwise, how could the Wang family be so arrogant and despotic? Chapter 557. When everyone heard Wang Tiejuan's words, they started discussing uncomfortably. According to Wang Tiejuan's words, the Wang family was the law in the imperial capital. What was the current emperor worth? Your Wang family is so powerful. Don't tell me you don't put the current emperor in your eyes? Yi Hao looked at Wang Taijun and asked coldly. He wanted to see if Wang Taijun dared to admit it. Ha! Wang Taijun laughed coldly. His meaning was obvious, that since Wang Taijun shut up. Before Wang Taijun could finish, Wang Haitao anxiously interrupted him. Although the Wang family was considered a tyrant in the Yanlong imperial capital, they had long planned to replace Yi Hao. But before they knew the Fire Dragon Empire's background, there were some things that couldn't be said. Wang Taijun instantly realized that he had said something wrong after being yelled at. If he hadn't been stopped by Wang Haitao just now, He would have really said something wrong and been used by someone with ulterior motives. Then, the Wang family would have endless trouble. Thinking of this and listening to the discussions around him, Wang Taijun couldn't help but break out in cold sweat. You have some brains. Seeing that it was Wang Haitao who stood out to stop him, Yihao also felt a little surprised. In order to alleviate his mistake, Wang Taijun couldn't help but look around. Suddenly, Wang Taijun was puzzled. One had to know that Elder Li had protected Wang Haitao. But why hadn't Elder Li appeared when Wang Haitao's life was in danger? Eldest young master, where is Elder Li? Wang Tiejun's question immediately ignited Wang Haitao. Originally, he was already feeling restless because of Elder Li's death and didn't know how to explain it to his family. But this Wang Taijun, he really touched the pot that didn't boil. Dead. Wang Haitao's tone was unhappy, but he still spoke the truth. What? Dead? Who did it? Where's Elder Li's corpse? Wang Tiejun's face was full of shock as he asked several questions. The Black Armored Army all pricked up their ears. This was because Old Li was very prestigious in the Wang clan. He was even the idol of many of the Black Armored Army present. But now, they were told that Elder Li was dead. How could they believe it? Over there, Wang Haitao pointed at Old Man Li's body, which was too horrible to look at, and said angrily, "This." Wang Taijun saw Elder Li's miserable appearance and could not help sucking in a breath of cold air. Then, he looked at Yihao. Through Wang Hai and Tao's gaze, he knew that Yihao was the culprit. I can't be careless now. Wang Taijun resisted the urge to make a move. This was because even Elder Li wasn't a match for Yihao. Relying on a few hundred black armor soldiers to deal with some weaklings was obviously a pipe dream to deal with an expert like Yihao. At this time, he definitely couldn't let the Wang family fight, because it would be a great loss if they died. Go and find the officials guarding the city. Tell them that there are people causing trouble in the imperial city. Ask them to bring people to arrest them. Wang Taijun rolled his eyes and ordered the Black Armored Army beside him. Hearing Wang Tiejun's words, Wang Haitao secretly praised him and secretly gave him a thumbs up. This move of diverting the calamity to someone else was simply too ingenious. If Yihao and the Fire Dragon Empire were to fight, it would be best if both sides suffered great losses. Yihao heard Wang Tiejun's words and stood quietly at the side. He wanted to see if the Wang family could really cover up the sky with one hand. Beside the URA, there were hidden guards. Seeing the Wang family make a move, they thought for a moment and immediately went into the crowd. Great Commander Zhang Yang, there are people causing trouble in the city. My eldest young master is present. Please provide assistance. A Black Armored Army immediately found Zhang Yang and said, Zhang Yang was originally just a small commander, but because he followed Yihao from the beginning, he had been doing well. After climbing to his current position, he controlled nearly 10,000 elite soldiers. Zhang Yang narrowed his eyes and glanced at the Black Armored Army. He softly said, "Oh," and ignored him. Seeing Zhang Yang's expression, the Black Armored Army immediately said, My eldest young master said that as long as the great commander provides assistance, there will be great rewards. Hearing the Black Armored Army's words, Zhang Yang immediately beamed with joy. What great rewards? Someone is causing trouble in the imperial city. It's my duty to deal with it. The Black Armored Army cursed in his heart, but he forced a flattering smile on his face. Men, gather 3,000 soldiers and follow me. Zhang Yang raised his arm and ordered his subordinates. Ta-ta-ta, 3,000 elites of the imperial city immediately rushed in the direction of Yihao. Seeing the 3,000 elites, the onlookers discussed animatedly. This Wang family is too powerful. They can even mobilize the imperial city's elites. Sigh, it seems that the situation in the imperial city has been fixed. This kid is finished. Going against the imperial city's elites is equivalent to going against the entire Fire Dragon Empire. Greetings, eldest young Master Wang. Seeing Wang Haitao, Zhang Yang immediately showed a flattering smile. Thank you for your help, great Commander Zhang Yang. I will definitely inform my father. Then, eldest young master, please put in a few good words. Because Yihao's back was facing Zhang Yang, When he heard Zhang Yang's voice, he immediately felt that it was familiar. Yi Hao just remembered that Zhang Yang was his first follower. Check Zhang Yang's personal information. Yi Hao immediately said to the system. Zhang Yang's loyalty, 39 strength. Level 3 martial spirit. Just looking at the loyalty, Yi Hao's face immediately turned pale. His 39 loyalty was like having no loyalty at all. It meant that Zhang Yang could betray him at any time. That kid, when you see me, why don't you quickly surrender? In order to perform well, Zhang Yang hugged Wang Haitao's thigh. He directly pointed at Yi Hao's back and shouted, "Zhang Yang, you're not bad," Yi Hao said angrily with a smile. The dignified, great commander of the Fire Dragon Empire's imperial capital turned out to be this kind of trash. How could he not be angry? Hearing Yi Hao's familiar yet strange voice, Zhang Yang could not help but frown. He looked at Yi Hao's back and asked, "Who are you?" "Take a good look at who I am," Yi Hao shouted and turned around directly. Seeing Yi Hao's face, Zhang Yang carefully looked, and instantly his eyes widened. His heart was directly filled with fear. Zhang Yang instantly recalled the scene a few years ago when Yi Hao was still prince. He was in a restaurant, kneeling in front of Yi Hao, and now he actually colluded with the Wang family and was caught red-handed by Yi Hao. Thinking of this, Zhang Yang's legs began to tremble uncontrollably. "Why, Zhang Yang, do you know this little bastard?" Wang Taijun saw Zhang Yang's unnatural expression and asked. Zhang Yang was shocked and wanted to immediately shut Wang Tiejuan's mouth. Daring to call the emperor a little bastard, he really did not want to live anymore. He is the current emperor. Zhang Yang had almost used up all his strength to say those words. Chapter 558. Zhang Yang's voice was not loud, but most people heard it. Then they looked at Yi Hao in shock. Although they had heard that the emperor of the Fire Dragon Empire was young, they did not expect him to be so young. Everyone looked at Wang Haitao. Unsurprisingly, Wang Haitao had kicked an iron plate this time. He dared to attack the emperor in the imperial capital and even mobilize the emperor's elites. These crimes were not small, but there were also some people who thought more comprehensively and could not determine who would win or lose. After all, the Wang family was an emperor-level force. They might do something desperate. "Zhang Yang, are you kidding?" Wang Haitao and Wang Taijun asked at the same time. "This guilty general greets the emperor. Long live the emperor." Zhang Yang was too lazy to care about the two. The fear in his heart made him kneel on the ground. The elites of the imperial capital were stunned. Didn't they say they were here to catch the troublemaker? Why did an emperor appear and kneel? Without thinking, all the elites of the imperial capital knelt in front of Yi Hao. "It's His Majesty. It's His Majesty." This commoner greets the emperor. Long live the emperor. Everyone did not expect Yi Hao to be the emperor. They were nervous and excited as they knelt on the ground and shouted, "Zhang Yang, you did well." Yi Hao strode toward Zhang Yang. Zhang Yang lowered his head and looked at Yi Hao, who was walking towards him. He could not control the sweat on his head. Your Majesty, Zhang Yang was so nervous that he could not speak. "You deserve to die." Yi Hao kicked Zhang Yang's face, and Zhang Yang was instantly sent flying. Everyone saw this scene and did not dare to breathe. "He's dead." Everyone looked at the lifeless Zhang Yang. They did not expect Yi Hao to be so decisive. As for the 3,000 elites, their bodies began to tremble. Yi Hao glanced at the 3,000 elites and walked towards Wang Haitao and Wang Taijun. "What do you want to do?" Wang Haitao and Wang Taijun took a step back in fear. "Tell me, who is the law in this imperial city?" Yi Hao grabbed Wang Haitao by the collar and asked loudly. Wang Haitao was completely stunned by Yi Hao's imposing manner. Although he was unwilling to say it, for the sake of his life, he said, "Of course it's you, Your Majesty. Since we are the law, do my words hold any weight?" Yi Hao continued to ask sternly. "It works." Wang Haitao nodded fearfully. "All right then, I bestow death upon you. If you don't die, you will be charged with the crime of disobeying an imperial decree," Yi Hao said in a dignified tone. "What?" Hearing Yi Hao's words, Wang Haitao almost peed his pants, because the crime of disobeying a decree was a crime that could lead to the extermination of an entire clan. But how could he possibly commit suicide? He might as well just kill him. Which bastard dares to bully my son? Suddenly, a loud shout was heard. Then, dozens of figures landed on the ground. One of them, a middle-aged man in luxurious clothes, shouted, "Thud, thud, thud! Stand, stand, stand! Protect His Majesty!" Suddenly, the ground began to tremble. Troops rushed out from all directions. There were at least a few 100,000 soldiers. The ones leading the troops were Li Hong, Guan Yu, and the others. "Sorry to trouble you, Lord Li. You even put in so much effort to help my son." Wang Baiyong looked at Li Hong, who was leading the troops. Although his eyes were full of contempt, he still smiled and said, "Then please capture this bastard, Lord Li." "How dare you? This is the emperor!" Li Hong shouted coldly. Hearing Li Hong's words, Wang Baiyong raised his eyebrows. He didn't expect that after waiting for so long, the emperor finally appeared. "Oh, then my son has offended you. Let's go," Wang Baiyong said casually and was about to leave with his men. The onlookers looked up at Yi Hao. They want to know how Yi Hao would deal with this. This Wang Baiyong clearly did not put Yi Hao in his eyes. Actually, Wang Baiyong also wanted to see what the Emperor of the Fire Dragon Empire was capable of and where his bottom line was. Moreover, he was from Imperial family. Yi Hao would definitely treat him well and wouldn't dare to offend him. I'll say it again. You can either commit suicide or be punished for disobeying an imperial decree. Yi Hao sat on the heavenly dragon throne and said to Wang Haitao again. Wang Haitao looked at Yi Hao fearfully and looked at Wang Baiyong for help. "There are many people who want to destroy my Wang family, but there are none in the Fire Dragon Empire. Let's go." Wang Baiyong snorted. He waved his hand and wanted to leave with the Wang family. Seeing Wang Baiyong's tough attitude, everyone looked at Yi Hao. They wanted to see how Yi Hao would deal with this. "Don't leave a single one alive," Yi Hao suddenly ordered. Before the crowd could react, Zhuge Liang's figure moved and disappeared into the crowd. Bang! 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 The sound of people falling to the ground rang out. Everyone looked over. Not a single one of the Wang family was left alive. "Zhuge Liang," Yi Hao shouted softly, "the Wang family doesn't care about me. They are arrogant and despotic. Destroy the entire family." "Yes, Your Majesty." Zhuge Liang's voice came from the crowd. Everyone was shocked. They didn't expect the plot to develop so quickly. They didn't even have time to react. The entire Wang family was finished. They finally knew that the Fire Dragon Empire wasn't as weak as it looked. The hidden strength was unimaginable. "Long live the Emperor! Long live the Emperor!" Everyone shouted in unison. Many families like the Wang family remembered this scene. They couldn't offend the Yin-Long imperial family. "Haha, it's so lively. Which one of you is Yi Hao? Come out and die." Suddenly, a group of golden-armored warriors descended from the sky. This group of people was naturally sent by the Purple Heaven Divine Emperor to kill Yi Hao. Yi Hao's eyes widened when he felt the aura of these people. He knew that he was no match for them. Yi Hao looked at the crowd below, afraid of hurting the innocent. "Who are you?" Yi Hao stared at them and asked. "You don't need to know that. Just know that you will die," one of the team leaders said coldly. Just as Yi Hao was thinking of a solution, a group of black armored warriors flew over. They were the 10 Death Gods' envoys. They don't come with good intentions. Looking at the 10 Death Gods' envoys flying over, Yi Hao naturally knew that these people weren't here to help him. There were more than 20 high-level martial god realm experts, and they came from 2 forces. Yi Hao was curious. Which forces did they belong to? After all, they couldn't be ordinary forces if they could dispatch so many high-level martial god realm experts. But he was very clear that these 2 groups of people weren't from the heaven-shaking divine nation. The heaven-shaking divine nation's speed couldn't be that fast. Seeing the arrival of the Death God's envoys, the golden-armored warriors tensed. The atmosphere became tense. They didn't know who these Death God's envoys were. The Death God's envoys also stopped, looking suspiciously at the golden-armored warriors. Chapter 559. Do it. The commander of the golden armored warriors fell for the trap. He thought that the envoy of the death god was Yi Hao's man and immediately attacked the envoy of the death god. Seeing the golden armored warriors attacking, the envoy of the death god was not to be trifled with. He did not care about anything else and attacked one after another. In the blink of an eye, the golden armored warriors and the envoy of the death god were already fighting. Fight, fight, it's best if you kill him. Yi Hao was happy to sit on the mountain and watch the tigers fight. As for the onlookers below, they all hid in a panic. They didn't even have the qualifications to watch a battle between high-level martial god realm cultivators. Just the aftershock of the battle was enough to crush them. Li Hong, why are you still in a daze? Evacuate all the citizens from the city. Yi Hao immediately shouted when he saw that Li Hong was still in a daze. Yes, yes, as you command. Li Hong also reacted quickly and ordered the citizens to evacuate the city quickly. Kill this group of idiots for me. How dare they behave so atrociously in my territory? Take a piss and look at their own morality. Watching the battle between the golden armored warriors and the envoy of the death god, Yi Hao ignited the atmosphere. The golden armored warriors and the envoy of the death god did not speak and focused on the battle. They both thought that the other party was Yi Hao's subordinate. Don't let them go. Reinforcements will be here soon. Yi Hao saw that the atmosphere was not tense enough and continued to shout. Sure enough, Yi Hao's shout immediately had an effect. The golden armored warriors and the envoy of the death god used all their strength at this time, wanting to defeat the other party. In the void, dozens of figures were constantly intertwining. It was like black and golden lines were intertwined. The roar of martial arts colliding rang out continuously. Houses in the imperial city collapsed one after another. They were all destroyed by the remaining power of the martial gods. Fortunately, Yi Hao had evacuated the citizens in time. Otherwise, there would have been heavy casualties. Yi Hao narrowed his eyes and looked at the void. Blood was spilling everywhere. Who are they? Yi Hao was still guessing which force the envoy of the death god and the golden armored warriors belonged to. Fortunately, it was a coincidence this time. Otherwise, he would have been in deep trouble. In order to prevent these people from reacting, Yi Hao secretly released all the heaven-devouring rats and ancient mutated beasts and hid them in the surroundings. Yi Hao did not think it was enough. Thus he summoned 6,000 ancient beasts and fed them all the peak martial sacred realm pills. Yi Hao only felt that his safety was guaranteed with the help of nearly 20,000 demonic beasts at the peak of the martial sage realm. Only then did he relax a little. Yi Fun, take this peak martial god elixir. Yi Hao handed the peak martial god elixir to Gui Yifan. Gui Yifan excitedly received the peak martial god realm elixir. She glanced at the void and immediately swallowed it. Boom! Suddenly, a figure fell from the sky and crashed into the ground. Yifan. Yi Hao immediately took out a mind control pill and threw it to Gui Yifan. Gui Yifan immediately understood. She flew to the unconscious golden armored warrior and stuffed the mind control pill into his mouth. Ding dong! Congratulations to the host for obtaining a 7th order martial god. Hearing the system's notification, Yi Hao immediately sent the golden armored warrior into the cage lake. This 7th order martial god realm master was a great help to him. Bang! Following the golden armored warrior's fall, another golden armored warrior crashed to the ground. This time, without Yi Hao's instructions, Gui Yifan immediately flew to the golden armored warrior and stuffed the mind control pill into his mouth. Ding dong! Congratulations to the host for obtaining a 7th order martial god. It seems that this group of black armored warriors is much more powerful than the golden armored warriors. Yi Hao saw that the number of golden armored warriors outnumbered the envoys of the death god. But so far, not a single envoy of the death god had fallen. On the contrary, 2 golden armored warriors had been seriously injured. Kill them for me. The reinforcements will be here soon. Yi Hao's heart was blooming with joy after obtaining 2 high-level martial gods. He did not forget to continue teasing the envoys of the death god and the golden armored warriors. In the void, one black and one golden armored warrior exchanged blows back and forth, fighting fiercely. The power of the martial path exploded in the void, turning into streaks of brilliant colors. Bang! Suddenly, one of the envoys of the death god fell to the ground. Finally, a black guy came. Seeing the envoy of the death god fall to the ground, Yihao was delighted. Gui Yifan had already flown over and fed the mind control pill to the envoy of the death god. Ding dong! Congratulations to the host for obtaining an 8th Order Martial God. No wonder. Hearing the system's notification, Yihao immediately understood why the envoys of the death god were so persistent. It turned out that their cultivation was one level higher than the golden armored warriors. Looks like my decision was right. Yihao rejoiced inwardly, because these subordinates were so powerful. After all, those two sides had commanders who were at least 9th Order Martial Gods. Fight! Fight! Give me a few more subordinates. Yihao looked at the void. The corners of his mouth curved into a smile. The bigger the battle, the longer it lasted. But there were also golden armored warriors and envoys of the death god falling to the ground from time to time. Basically, those who fell to the ground were unconscious. Yihao did not refuse any of them, accepting them all as his subordinates. There are already 7 golden armored warriors and 4 black guys. Yihao counted the number of people in the cage lake. At this moment, the battle in the void was not as intense as it had been at the beginning. But there were still 9 golden armored warriors and 6 envoys of the death god. Adding the two sides together, there were still 15 people left. 15 high-level martial gods. Yihao was also feeling a lot of pressure, and now was the time when Yihao was nervous. Because the number of people on both sides was decreasing, the chances of being discovered were also increasing. And the 20,000 mutated beasts and heaven-devouring rats seemed to be able to sense the change in Yihao's mood. All of them were focused on the void. We can't fight anymore, kill that kid first. The golden armored warrior commander was getting more and more nervous as the battle went on. He did not expect the Fire Dragon Empire to have such a strong expert. Like mother, like son. Not only was Imperial Ant so powerful, even her son was so monstrous. In a country that was just a duchy, the dragon force had already surpassed all the holy dynasties. Of course, they knew about the empire ranking list. Right now, he was starting to suspect that Yihao might have the help of the Imperial Ant. If that was the case, then it was simply too terrifying. If that was the case, wouldn't it mean that the purple Heaven Divine Emperor had been toyed with by the Imperial Ant without realizing it? But in any case, looking at the less than 10 people around, he knew that he could not continue fighting like this. If they continued fighting, they would not be able to complete their mission even if all of them died here. Chapter 560. You guys delay them. I'll go capture that dog emperor. The envoy of the death god's commander also spoke in a hoarse voice. The golden armored warrior and the envoy of the death god's commander charged towards Yihao at almost the same time. Don't hurt my lord! Gui Yifan roared and rushed towards the two. It's over. Seeing Gui Yifan rush out impatiently, Yihao knew that his plan had been exposed. Seeing Gui Yifan rushing towards them, the golden armored warrior and the envoy of the death god did not dare to underestimate Gui Yifan and attack Gui Yifan together. Then, the two exchanged a look and saw the confusion in each other's eyes. Thinking carefully, how could they not know that they had been tricked by Yihao? Do it! Knowing that they had been exposed, Yihao could no longer pretend. Following Yihao's order, 20,000 heaven-devouring rats and ancient mutated beasts roared and rushed towards the golden armored warrior and the envoy of the death god. Seeing so many heaven-devouring rats and ancient mutated beasts suddenly rushing out, the golden armored warrior and the envoy of the death god's expression changed greatly. They did not expect that there would be such a trick up their sleeves. Get lost! Seeing the heaven-devouring rats rushing towards them, the envoy of the death god issued a mechanical voice and attacked the heaven-devouring rats. The heaven-devouring rats wailed and were sent flying. No one knew whether they were dead or alive. The golden armored warrior was not to be outdone. He punched the ancient mutated beast's body, and the ancient mutated beast was turned into minced meat and split into pieces. This is the gap between realms. Seeing this scene, Yi Hao sighed anxiously. He had thought that a peak martial saint was strong enough. But in front of a high-level martial god, it was like a baby that could be easily killed. Roar! At this time, Gui Yifan suddenly let out a strange roar. Yi Hao immediately looked over and saw that Gui Yifan's eyes had turned red, looking incomparably violent and full of killing intent. What was going on? Yi Hao was very puzzled when he saw Gui Yifan's reaction, because he had never seen Gui Yifan change like this before. Moreover, Yi Hao discovered that the violent Gui Yifan's strength had increased by more than one level. Swish! At this time, the corpse of the ancient mutated beast shot towards Gui Yifan, and Gui Yifan directly swallowed it. After swallowing the corpse, Gui Yifan's aura became stronger. Seeing this scene world, Yi Hao had a few guesses. Due to the fact that this continent used to be the beast origin continent, for some reason, it had become a place where humans reigned supreme. In the past, beasts were magical beasts. As for the devouring beast, it was the guardian of these magical beasts. When Gui Yifan saw the ancient mutated beasts being slaughtered, he would naturally go crazy. As for the devourer beast, it was capable of devouring all living things with strength. It was not strange for it to devour the corpses of ancient beasts. The golden armored warrior and the envoy of the death god kept killing the ancient mutated beasts, but every time they killed one, it would be swallowed by Gui Yifan and turned into Gui Yifan's strength. Gradually, the golden armored warrior and the envoy of the death god no longer dared to kill the ancient mutated beasts. After all, who knew how much Gui Yifan's strength would increase? Kill him first. The golden armored warrior suddenly looked at the commander of the envoy of the death god. Kill! The envoy of the death god agreed with the golden armored warrior commander and said in a hoarse and terrifying voice. The two of them no longer paid attention to the ancient mutated beasts at the peak of the martial saint level. They turned and charged towards Gui Yifan. Roar! Seeing the golden armored warrior and the envoy of the death god charging towards him, Gui Yifan was not afraid at all. He directly crashed into them like a human bomb. Gui Yifan punched the golden armored warrior and the envoy of the death god respectively. The powerful strength caused the two of them to change their expressions. This was because Gui Yifan's strength had already completely surpassed theirs. The golden armored warrior commander and the envoy of the death god commander met Gui Yifan's fists with great difficulty. The veins on the golden armored warrior's face were bulging and his face was distorted. It was obvious how terrifying the strength he was enduring was. Bang! The envoy of the death god commander was not in a good state either. Not only did he retreat, but the metal mask on his face also shattered into pieces. It's actually a woman. Seeing the face behind a metal mask, Yi Hao was also greatly surprised. The first impression that the envoy of the death god gave Yi Hao was that he was a killing machine cultivated by some organization. But Yi Hao had never thought that this killing machine would actually be a woman. Yi Hao could clearly feel that when the envoy of the death god saw his mask shattered, a trace of panic appeared on his cold and expressionless face. And because of this panic, Gui Yifan had a chance. At this moment, Gui Yifan would not show any mercy to the envoy of the death god's chest. His other fist was not idle either. He blasted it towards the golden armored warrior commander. Both of them spat out a mouthful of blood at the same time and were sent flying backwards. Gui Yifan did not give the two of them any chance at all. He followed up with another attack. His fists were like raindrops, falling on the two of them. The two of them, who had been majestic at the beginning, were now beaten like stray dogs, unable to fight back. Dying, Gui Yifan beat the two of them until they could not get up. He roared and smashed his fists toward their heads. The two of them immediately closed their eyes, waiting for death. Yifan, stop! Yi Hao immediately stopped him. The best way to deal with an enemy was to kill the enemy's subordinates. And an even better way than killing the enemy's subordinates was to subdue the enemy's subordinates and use them to deal with the enemy. Now, the commander of the golden armored warriors and the commander of the death god's emissaries had become his prey. If he killed them directly, it would be too much of a pity. After all, they were high-level martial god experts. If he spent soul points and resurrection points, it would be a huge expense. After being yelled at by Yi Hao, the blood-red color in Gui Yifun's eyes immediately began to dissipate. He slowly recovered from his berserk state. This subordinate has disturbed the Lord. This subordinate deserves 10,000 deaths. Gui Yifun recalled everything that had happened just now and immediately apologized to Yi Hao. You did well. Yi Hao smiled with satisfaction. If Gui Yifun hadn't suddenly gone berserk, he wouldn't have been able to subdue the golden armored warrior and the envoy of the death god so easily. Gui Yifun looked at the golden armored warrior commander and the envoy of the death god commander at his feet and immediately took out 2 mind control pills. The golden armored warrior commander and the envoy of the death god commander looked at the pills in Gui Yifun's hand with fear and confusion. Although they wanted to struggle, they were powerless. They could only watch as Gui Yifun stuffed the mind control pills into their mouths. Ding dong! Congratulations to the host for obtaining a 9th Order Martial God Expert. Ding dong! Congratulations to the host for obtaining a 9th Order Martial God Expert. Boom! 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 The sound of battle still came from the void. It turned out that the golden armored warrior and the envoy of the death god were too engrossed in their battle and did not notice the abnormality on the ground. Chapter 561. Gui Yifun nodded and leaped into the air, charging towards the golden armored warriors and envoys. Bang! 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 With a series of bangs, the remaining 8 golden armored warriors and 5 envoys were smashed to the ground. All of them looked towards the sky in panic. They couldn't believe that there was someone who could defeat them so easily in this place. They didn't even have time to react to what was going on. They felt as if a heavy blow had landed on their bodies, causing them to be seriously injured and unable to move. To be able to do this, one's strength was definitely comparable to a peak martial god, or even stronger. Where's the commander? The golden armored warriors and envoys could only place their hopes on the commander. They looked around anxiously. How could they have known that their commander had already been defeated before they even arrived? But before they could search for the commander, Gui Yifun had already fed them mind control pills. Ding dong! Congratulations to host for obtaining a 7th Order Martial God. Ding dong! Congratulations to host for obtaining a 7th Order Martial God. Ding dong! Congratulations to host for obtaining an 8th Order Martial God. After listening to the system's notification, Yi Hao calculated that he had obtained 16 golden armored warriors and 10 envoys. As for the ancient mutated beasts and heaven-devouring rats, he had also lost more than 40 of them. But overall, he had profited greatly this time. Who are you people, and what are your names? Yi Hao released the golden armored warrior commander and the death god emissary commander and inquired. The golden armored warriors and envoys were shocked. They didn't expect that their commander had already been subdued. I am the Four Fiend Alliance's envoy of the death god. I don't have a name. Although the envoy of the death god had already submitted to Yi Hao, his voice was still hoarse. Yi Hao found it hard to believe that such a voice came from the mouth of a young girl. Then I will confer you the title of Queen of the Death God. From now on, your duty is to complete the missions I issue. Yi Hao had already gained some understanding of the Four Fiends' divine union during Xiao Yi's tribulation. However, Yi Hao never expected that he would clash with the Four Fiend Alliance so soon. But trouble was often like this. If you didn't go to him, he would come to you. Since the Four Fiends Alliance wanted to deal with him, Lin Fan was not someone to be trifled with. He would definitely get his revenge. Thank you, my lord. Hearing Yi Hao's words, the Grim Reaper Queen agreed expressionlessly, because her mind had always been instilled with the belief to complete the mission and kill. As for the name, it was dispensable to her. It was all the same to her. Hearing the Queen of Death's voice, Yi Hao still felt uncomfortable. Your voice. Hearing Yi Hao call her voice, The Grim Reaper Queen immediately revealed a troubled expression, because she was already used to this kind of sound. In the future, you can maintain your original voice in front of me. In front of outsiders, you can maintain your current voice. Yes, yes, my lord. The Queen of Death tried to use her original voice, but when she spoke, she was still not used to it and stuttered a little. Nice. Although the Queen of Death spoke shyly, her bell-like voice made Yi Hao's eyes light up. Thank you, my lord. Hearing Yi Hao's praise, the Grim Reaper Queen blushed and resumed her hoarse voice. Seeing the Queen of Death's shy side, the rest of the emissaries of the Death God were all in disbelief. They were even more surprised that the Queen of Death was a woman. They would never have imagined that the commander, who was even more powerful than them and was more like a machine, would actually be a woman. And most important thing was that she actually had a shy expression on her face. Just get used to it. Seeing the Queen of Death's expression, Yi Hao didn't make things difficult for her anymore. Instead, he asked, "How many more people like you are there in the Four Fiend Alliance?" This was what Yi Hao was concerned about. The Four Fiends Alliance had sent out their subordinates this time. News of the failed assassination would spread sooner or later. At that time, the Four Fiends Alliance wouldn't let the matter rest so easily. They would definitely send out more experts. Yi Hao had to be mentally prepared. The Four Fiends Alliance has 72 Death Guards. Each Death Guard has 10 people. I am a 36th commander of the Death Guards. The Queen of Death slowly said in her original voice. What? 72 guards? Hearing the Queen of Death's words, Yi Hao couldn't remain calm. There were only 10 emissaries of the Death God. He had spent so much effort to subdue them. The remaining 71 Death Guards numbered at least 710 people. 710 high-level martial God realm experts. Just thinking about it made Yi Hao feel pressured. However, this was far from the end. The Queen of Death continued. This is only the Four Fiends Alliance's special forces. There are also some ordinary troops. The number of martial God realm experts isn't small either. Yi Hao's brows were tightly knitted together. Compared to the Four Fiends Alliance, he was pitifully weak. Moreover, his dragon force had surpassed the Four Fiends Alliance. The Four Fiends Alliance definitely wouldn't let him off easily. Other than the Four Fiends Alliance, there was also the Four Divine Nations. He had broken their rules and crossed their bottom line. They definitely wouldn't let him off. Even so, Yi Hao didn't regret it. Dragon Force was something that could only be encountered and not sought. If it was real, it could only be developed step by step. If he wanted to accumulate 30 billion Dragon Force points, he would need at least several tens of thousands of years to do so. Moreover, Dragon Force was very important to a country's development. Not to mention other things. Just the strength of the martial path in the Fire Dragon Empire's region was comparable to any holy dynasty's martial path. It was only a matter of time before more and more people would be attracted to the Fire Dragon Empire's region to cultivate. Similarly, if the people of the Fire Dragon Empire cultivated in such a dense martial path, there would be more and more experts. However, it was clear that some forces wouldn't give the Fire Dragon Empire this opportunity. The Four Fiends Alliance was the best example. No matter what, Dragon Force was very important. Even if it meant risking danger, Yi Hao wouldn't hesitate. Then who are you? Yi Hao asked the golden armored warriors after learning about the Four Fiends Alliance's emissaries of the Death God. The golden armored warriors looked at each other. The commander stood out and said, "We are from the Purple Divine Nation." What? Purple Divine Nation? Yi Hao exclaimed when he heard the golden armored commander's words. Even the emissaries of the Death God looked at the golden armored warriors in shock. At their level, they had naturally heard of the Purple Divine Nation's name. It was one of the 4 divine nations in the Myriad Kingdom continent. It was a top-notch existence. Even the Four Fiends Alliance didn't dare to provoke it. Chapter 562. At this moment, Yi Hao's mood was extremely complicated, because the Purple Sky Divine Kingdom was the force that he had been searching for. Because not only ZMO was there, but also his father, who had been captured. "Were you sent by Xing?" Yi Hao guessed. "Are we not the eldest princess?" The golden-armored warrior commander immediately said. Then who sent you? Yi Hao found it hard to imagine that other than Zixing, who else from the Purple Sky Divine Kingdom would send people to kill him? It's the Divine Emperor. What? Hearing the golden-armored warrior's words, Yi Hao's eyes narrowed. He couldn't understand why the Purple Sky Divine Emperor, who was one of the strongest in the Myriad Kingdom continent, would attack a small fry like him. How is Mo doing? And where is my father now? Yi Hao asked 2 questions in a row. The second princess is cultivating in the Imperial Ant's residence. As for the Lord's father, he is now imprisoned in the heavenly prison by the Divine Emperor. The golden-armored warrior commander said everything he knew. Who is the Imperial Ant? Yi Hao asked curiously. Don't tell me you don't know. Hearing Yi Hao's question, the golden-armored warrior was a little shocked and looked at Yi Hao with wide eyes. Yi Hao was dumbfounded and shook his head. The Imperial Ant is your mother, the golden-armored warrior said when he saw that Yi Hao was really puzzled. What? Yi Hao froze on the spot as if he had been struck by lightning. He had never thought that he would have a mother. Although he had transmigrated, he had long been one with the soul of this world. Therefore, he still had an incomparable desire for kinship in this world. But all along, he had thought that he only had Yi Batian as his father, but he had never thought that he had a mother. And it seemed that this mother had a big background. She was actually the Imperial Ant of one of the 4 Divine Kingdoms. Although he didn't know how his mother was in the Purple Sky Divine Kingdom, looking at the respectful expressions in the eyes of these golden-armored warriors, he knew that his mother's status was definitely not too low. As for the Death God's messengers, they all looked at Yi Hao in shock. They did not expect Yi Hao to have such a powerful background. He was the son of the Imperial Ant of the Violet Sky Divine Kingdom, one of the 4 Divine Kingdoms. Furthermore, the Purple Sky Divine Nation was different from other nations. It was controlled by the God Emperor and the Imperial Ant. Didn't that mean that Yi Hao was the crown prince of the Violet Sky Divine Kingdom? Is my mother doing well? Yi Hao asked in a slightly nervous tone. Right now, the situation in the Purple Heaven Divine Kingdom is chaotic. For the sake of Master, Imperial Ant has already declared war on the Purple Heaven Divine Emperor. The golden-armored warrior said honestly. For me, Yi Hao didn't understand. After hearing the golden-armored warrior commander's explanation, Yi Hao didn't understand. He finally knew why his father was captured and why he was killed. It turned out that his mother and father had eloped and given birth to him. If this was an ordinary family, it would be fine. However, his mother was actually the Imperial Ant of the Violet Heaven Divine Kingdom. That was something that concerned the face of the Violet Heaven Divine Kingdom. Furthermore, the Violet Heaven Divine Kingdom had decreed that the God Emperor and the Imperial Ant were not allowed to marry. Even if they were to marry, they had to marry someone of equal status. At the very least, it had to be the crown prince of one of the other 3 Divine Kingdoms. However, his mother just so happened to fall in love with the Emperor of a duchy. The disparity between their statuses was instantly magnified. The Imperial Ant of the 4 Divine Kingdoms and the Emperor of a duchy. No matter how one looked at it, it was impossible for the 2 of them to be together. However, the 2 of them secretly got together and even had a child together. That child was naturally Yi Hao. The moment Yi Hao was born, the matter was completely exposed. Naturally, the Violet Sky Divine Kingdom strongly opposed it. As for Yi Hao's mother, she was eventually captured and brought back to the Violet Sky Divine Kingdom despite all the pressure. However, the Violet Sky Divine Kingdom still wouldn't let the matter rest. After all, they already viewed Yi Hao as a disgrace. And the best way to wash away this disgrace was to kill Yi Hao and Yi Batian. However, coincidentally, Yi Hao wasn't in Yi when the country of Yi was in chaos. If Yi Hao was still in Yi, Yi Hao might have been killed long ago. Then, there wouldn't be the current Yi Hao. However, it was precisely because Yi Hao wasn't in Yi that he saved Yi Batian's life and his own. When the Imperial Ant saw her husband being captured and her son suffering, she, who was a genius, naturally wouldn't let the matter rest so easily. Soon, the Imperial Ant managed to win over a group of people to support her. Gradually, the Violet Sky Divine Kingdom seemed to be united. However, they were already divided into two factions. One faction supported the Imperial Ant, while the other supported the Violet Sky Divine Emperor. Looks like this Violet Sky Divine Emperor was forced by Mother into a corner. Yi Hao sighed. If his mother was in his previous life, she would definitely be on the same level as Wu Zetian. However, he could also see how sinister the Violet Sky Divine Emperor was. He actually sent someone to assassinate him when his mother wasn't paying attention. Fortunately, Gui Yifan was around this time. Otherwise, he would have been in deep trouble. The Violet Sky Divine Kingdom is waiting for me. Father and Mother are waiting for me. Emo is waiting for me. Yi Hao clenched his fists and swore. He didn't want his mother to bear so much pressure alone. He also wanted to help her. However, if he wanted to help his mother, he needed to have power and influence. However, based on his current power and influence, it was clearly not enough. If he wanted to reunite with his parents and ZMO, he needed to grow quickly. Origin Source Fragment. Yi Hao thought of the Origin Source Fragment first. The difference between his power and the Violet Sky Divine Kingdoms was simply too big. He could barely deal with the Four Fiends Alliance, let alone the Violet Sky Divine Kingdom, one of the four god nations. If the Violet Sky Divine Emperor sent more people, he would be finished. In the end, not only would he not be able to help his mother, but he would also drag her down and lose his life. However, if he could find the Origin Source Fragment, it would be different. As long as he could find all the Origin Source Fragments, he would be able to unlock all the generals and control all the demonic beasts in the entire continent. By then, he would truly be invincible in the entire Myriad Kingdoms continent. However, Yi Hao only had 6 Origin Source Fragments now. He was still short of 3 Origin Source Fragments. What you had to know was that his luck was already very good. In the Myriad Kingdom continent, no one had ever been able to collect 6 Origin Source Fragments in such a short period of time. This was because to find these 9 Origin Source Fragments in the Myriad Kingdom continent was like looking for a needle in a haystack. This was because the fragments were hidden in every corner of the continent, and no one could be sure of their exact location. However, Yi Hao already had some doubts about the next Origin Source Fragment. Chapter 563. Yi Hao took out the Beast Monster Sect Leader token. He had a feeling that the source fragment in Beast Roar Valley was related to this Sect Leader token. But there were 3 of them, and he only had 1. The other 2 were in Mu Shengzhen, and 1 was in Gedanzhen. As for the Gedanzhen token, Yi Hao believed that with Guo Shuefu there, Guo Jinyu wouldn't make things difficult for him. He just needed to find Mu Shengzhen's Sect Leader token. Mu Shengzhen, it's time to settle our debt. Yi Hao still couldn't forget that time when he was almost beaten to death. So much time had passed, and it was time for him to take revenge. Go to court. Yi Hao still planned to make arrangements for everyone before heading to Mu Shengzhen. In the main hall of the Fire Dragon Empire, Yi Hao sat on the dragon throne and looked down at the officials. The officials felt the aura from Yi Hao's body, and no one dared to say a word. Tell me, what is going on with the Wang family? Did any of you accept bribes from the Wang family? Yi Hao still didn't calm down about the Wang family's anger. It was just a small family, and they actually dared to be the overlord of the imperial capital. This was only because he had discovered it. If he hadn't discovered it, who knew what would have happened in the future? If he wasn't in the imperial capital one day, wouldn't the empire be destroyed? Moreover, apart from the Wang family, who knew how many other families like the Wang family were in the imperial court? We are useless, Your Majesty, please punish us. Li Hong was the first to kneel on the ground, following which the officials all knelt on the ground. I will definitely establish a life and death guard that I will be in charge of. The life guard will be in charge of protecting the Fire Dragon Empire, and the death guard will be in charge of investigating the officials. If there is any corruption, they will be executed. Now that the Fire Dragon Empire was rapidly developing, there had to be heavy punishments. As there were new blood joining the Fire Dragon Empire, there would always be some trash and evil people. If he didn't act as a deterrent, chaos would ensue sooner or later. Death Queen. Yi Hao suddenly shouted. Suddenly, a black shadow appeared in the hall. It was clad in pitch-black armor and wore a metal mask. His entire person looked very mysterious. In the future, you will be in charge of the Death Guard. Remember, from first-rank officials to commoners, as long as there is conclusive evidence, kill them immediately. Yes, Your Majesty. After saying that, the Queen of Death intentionally released her cultivation. This was all arranged by Yi Hao. That was because if he didn't use his cultivation to suppress them, he wouldn't be able to intimidate them. Hearing the Queen of Death's cold and hoarse voice, the officials felt their hearts tremble. Following that, the Grim Reaper's aura pressed down on them, causing them to be unable to breathe. They had a feeling that the Queen of Death didn't even need to do anything. She could kill them with just a thought. From now on, the few of you will still listen to the Queen of Death's orders. Just as Yi Hao's words left his mouth, everyone saw another 9 death gods' emissaries appear in the hall. Yes, Your Majesty, the 9 death guards replied in the same hoarse voice. At the same time, they released their cultivation. Suddenly, the entire hall fell silent. Everyone could hear the sound of their own heartbeats. Following that, Yi Hao's gaze swept across the crowd. The more flustered the officials were, the more he looked at them. These officials were more or less guilty of taking bribes and bending the law, but their crimes didn't warrant death. However, now that Yi Hao was staring at them, they felt even more guilty. Plop! Suddenly, one of the officials couldn't take it anymore and knelt on the ground in fright. Your Majesty, I am guilty. I am guilty. Please punish me, Your Majesty. If you fall down for investigation, you'll have to turn over a new leaf. If you are guilty, you will be demoted. If you are guilty, you will be stripped of your position. If you are guilty, you will be beheaded. Yi Hao said to the Death Queen. The Grim Reaper Queen waved her hand, and a Grim Reaper emissary immediately pulled the official down. Wait a moment. Since you came out to confess your crimes, your punishment can be reduced, Yi Hao said to the official. Thank you, Your Majesty. Thank you, Your Majesty. The official hurriedly thanked him. He had only been greedy for some money. At most, he would be demoted. However, with Yi Hao's words, it was very likely that he wouldn't be demoted. After all, it hadn't been easy for him to climb to his current position. He didn't want to be demoted. When he felt the cold aura of the Death Guard's metal armor beside him, his legs couldn't help but tremble. He swore that even if he died, he wouldn't do anything that involved taking bribes or bending the law again. If you confess your crimes, your punishment can be reduced. If the Death Guards investigate, your crimes will be increased. Yi Hao suddenly shouted. Then, he activated the Sky Dragon Throne. The imperial aura on his body was undoubtedly exposed and suppressed the civil and military officials. Roar! The rainbow dragon behind the Sky Dragon Throne suddenly roared. Yi Hao listened to the roar of the rainbow dragon. He felt that the shadow of the rainbow dragon seemed to have become much stronger. However, now that he was reorganizing the imperial court, he didn't have time to care about the changes in the Sky Dragon Throne for the time being. Yi Hao now had 30 billion dragon power. The dragon power and the imperial aura complemented each other. Therefore, one could imagine how astonishing the imperial aura on Yi Hao's body was. The imperial aura turned into a huge deterrent force that pressed down on everyone. Those officials who had made mistakes no longer had the strength to resist. They all knelt on the ground and admitted their mistakes. Seeing the officials kneeling on the ground, Yi Hao's face turned ashen. He finally knew how unqualified he was as an emperor, because in the imperial court, there were actually nearly 100 officials who had made mistakes. If he didn't do anything about it, no matter how big the Fire Dragon Empire developed in the end, it would probably be destroyed in the hands of this group of officials. Fortunately, he had discovered it in time, and seeing that there were actually so many officials who had made mistakes in the imperial court, Li Hong and Zhou Quan's faces also turned ugly, because they were usually the ones in charge of these officials. But there were actually so many officials who had made mistakes, and they actually didn't know about it. This was a mistake in their duty. In the next few days, Yi Hao didn't rush to Mu Shengzhen. Instead, he thoroughly investigated from top to bottom. Those who should be arrested were arrested, and those who should be killed were killed. He didn't show any mercy. Because of this, all the clans and officials were in danger. Some of the corrupt officials couldn't wait to give away all the money in their families. And those descendants of the big families didn't dare to be as arrogant and despotic as usual. They all hid at home like kittens. Because the Wang family was an example, everyone was afraid of being caught by the death guards. The consequence would be the extermination of the family. Moreover, Yi Hao didn't forget to raise the cultivation of the generals. But because he didn't have enough peak Martial Saint pills, Yi Hao had to use up all the soul points and resurrection points to raise the cultivation of all the generals to first-level martial god. At least they would have the strength to protect themselves. This also caused him to use up all the resurrection points and soul points he had accumulated for such a long time. And for a long time, Yi Hao had been instructing everyone to collect all kinds of resources. You're tuning into the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.